Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. I am back. 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 It is currently 12 noon. God is good, bro. God is good. That's all I can tell y'all, man. God is good regardless of what you're going through, regardless of anything bad you think your life looks like. You better understand that God is good. You better understand that God is actually taking care of you, bro. God is taking care of you. Just believe, stay strong, bro. Stay strong, sister. Stay strong, brother. Stay strong, moms, dads, teenagers, whoever's watching right now. Stay strong because you never know what your neighbors are going through. If you, if God actually shows you what your neighbors are going through right now, you would understand that things are really, really bad for some people and you have it good. Like now, we are at an Airbnb because Hurricane Helene, took us out of our apartment because no power. Georgia Power just said we would not have power till like October 5th or October 10th. So I'm thinking like my life is hard, but then I see all the people losing their cars, losing their houses, losing their lives. It's like, oh man, God, I'm grateful. I'm sorry if I ever or if I'm ever ungrateful. If I am ever ungrateful, dear Lord, forgive me. I am sorry, dear Lord, if I am ever ungrateful to you. My life is yours. I'm thankful. My family is protected. I am protected. We have food to eat. We have shelter. We have power, bro. So I'm grateful. All right. I just wanted to thank God real fast before the show, man. So right now, the title of the show today is The Future Looks Bright. The future looks bright regardless of what you hear, regardless of what the people are telling you, man. Things are looking really bad right now. It's a rainy day, it's a whatever going on. Just know the future looks bright for you, my friend. The future looks bright for you, your family and friends. Stay safe, bro. Stay believing. Never give up on yourself, your dreams, your family, on God. Never ever give up, bro. Never give up. All right, straight to the point. Today we are going to listen to the House Republicans when they had this little conversation outside of the Capitol, I guess. This was September 17, 2024. So it says House Republicans hold press briefing about sovereignty and the World Health Organization. Um, yes, let's listen and let's see what time it is. Shout out to Corinne. Shout out to uh oh shoot. We got a couple in the building. Morgan and Corin in the building. Oh, it's a love fest up in here, bro. Ellie, shout out to Ellie. You know what time it is, Ellie. God bless you for tuning in. All right, let's get it.
The least amount of attention relative to its importance in our country. And like many other issues, we're going to be deciding on November 5 what kind of a country we're going to be. And it applies to this issue as well. President Trump had withdrawn the U.S. from the WHO. And of course, the Biden administration, like every other disastrous decision they made, reversed those policies when the Biden-Harris administration got in charge. Well, later this week, the UN is going to hold a, quote, summit for the future. And they're going to produce, this is right from their website, an intergovernmentally negotiated, action-oriented pact for the future with a chapter on transforming global governance. Ascending beyond the powers being sought by its subordinate agency, the WHO, the UN is seeking even broader and more powerful authority, as you will hear a lot about today. The Biden-Harris administration apparently intends to fully support the surrender and compliance of the U.S. to the UN in these endeavors. They are aligned with the international globalists that hate America, that hate the Constitution, that hate our founders, that hate our founding Judeo-Christian principles, and they want America to become like the rest of the world. They don't want us to be subordinate to or governed by our Constitution. No, they want America to be subordinate to and governed by the UN, the World Health Assembly, and the WHO. And in fact, they intend to join with others at the UN summit this week to vote to award additional powers to the UN Secretary General. They seek to facilitate the evolution of the UN from an international cooperative body to an international governing body. These powers would be triggered by any one of a number of so-called global emergencies, whether it was a so-called climate emergency, a health emergency, a cyber emergency, or a gun violence emergency, whatever that's supposed to be, a financial emergency, or whatever they deem appropriate. And the Biden-Harris administration is in full agreement with the UN and the WHO on efforts to place us under their authority and to require such things as their international health regulations, including the surveillance of U.S. citizens, the censoring of dissenting views, and much more. The American people didn't vote for this, and they don't support this, and it's up to the people's representatives, that's us gathered here today, to have a responsibility to expose this and to reject this. The U.S. should defund the WHO again. We should withdraw from the WHO. Any agreements with the WHO or the UN should require Senate approval or disapproval. And a bipartisan House majority voted to require Senate approval just last week with Tom Tiffany's bill on the House floor. So I'm proud to be joined here by my House colleagues and others who are appropriately concerned and educated, informed, and leading on this issue. Again, this is the most important issue that's getting the least amount of attention relative to its importance and its impact on our country and on the American people. And with that, I yield to the gentleman from South Carolina, Ralph Norman.
Thank you, Congressman Good. I want to thank Frank Gaffney, Tony Perkins, all my colleagues for taking a lead role in this. As Congressman Good said, this is probably, other than our financial crisis this country's in, the most important issue to call attention to. The Summit of the Future will happen on September 22nd, 23rd. And folks, what that will do is cede America's authority, America's sovereignty to basically China. China is defined as a developing country. It is the number 2 economy behind America. It's not developing. It will cede our decision-making ability to China. That's what you need to know. Let me read out what the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, his policy brief 2, issued on March of 2023. I propose that the General Assembly provide the Secretary General and the United Nations system with a standing authority to convene and operationalize automatically an emergency platform in the event of a future complex global shock of sufficient scale. Guess who determines that? The World Health Organization. It reveals in their definition a possible global shock, including large-scale climate or environmental events, determined by who? The Secretary General. Future pandemics. We all endured what the problem we had with the latest virus. High-impact events, involving a biological agent, determined by who? The World Health Organization. Disruption of global flows of goods, determined by who? Not America, but the WHO under the Secretary General. Not only that, it requires a 5% payment by the United States every year of our total medical dollars spent, which are in the trillions. Bottom line, we cannot let this go. This is a top-line issue that America must be made aware of. It's got to go through the Senate, where it requires 60 votes. And we're going to fight to make sure all Americans know what's happening and stop it dead in its tracks. The WHO needs to be defunded, we need to do away with it, and America get out of it. I now call on Frank Gaffney with the Sovereignty Coalition.
Thank you, Congressman. Thank you to all of those present. I wanted to most especially thank those who voted last week for H.R. 1425, which did exactly what Congressman Norman just talked about, requires the United States Senate to advise and, I hope, dissent on the kind of surrender of our sovereignty to global government that is envisioned both with respect to the World Health Organization and with respect now to the UN. That's, make no mistake about it, the agenda of the UN Summit of the Future. That is unmistakably what they hope to put in train with their so-called Pact of the Future. And the thing that is absolutely infuriating about all of this is not only, as these gentlemen have said, this is really important. And most people in the media, most people in government, certainly the vast majority of Americans have no idea this is even going on, let alone reading in the rest of us. So it seems to me that what is needed now is not only to have the Senate charged, as with the World Health Organization's International Health Regulation Treaty, also the Pact for the Future. There must be no application of whatever they come up with in terms of world government by the UN Secretary General without the Senate's advice and consent. And secondly, I call here today on former President Donald Trump to use his platforms to address and draw out his opponent, the Vice President of the United States, on whether or not she supports world government. And if she doesn't, for her to disavow what the Biden administration is doing right now to try to bring it about. Thank you very much. Next up is Andy Biggs.
Thank you, Frank, and thanks to Bob and Ralph for organizing this and for all who are standing with us, my colleagues and those who are concerned about this. You know, this administration has attacked United States sovereignty since day one. They've done it by attacking our geographical integrity, and now they want to cede our sovereignty over to the United Nations, and in particular the World Health Organization. It's important to understand that how critical it is that we let the American people know how dangerous this administration is and their policies are. So, when we think about it, $850 million, that's our annual assessment today to the World Health Organization. But we consistently pay more than our assessment. Why is that? Because this administration wants to pay more. And we're the folks at the United Nations working hand in glove with the World Health Organization to have their way, we would be spending even more. And we'd be spending more to become enslaved to them because of the things that my previous speakers, my co-speakers have said. I introduced legislation, H.R. 2022, which gets us out of the World Health Organization and defunds our portion of it. Why is that? It's because the World Health Organization has become captured. It's been captured by our international adversary, China. We saw that as a result of the COVID-19 issue and how the World Health Organization protected Xi Jinping and the Chinese. We can't give up any more of our sovereignty, any more of our geographical integrity, any more of our economic integrity to foreign actors who have no concern about the United States of America other than to take our power and our money away. This administration is all in for it. That should be enough to tell everyone that this is a non-starter. I appreciate my colleagues for helping raise this today. I appreciate you and the media being here today, because this will be an ongoing effort. An ongoing effort as the out-of-control spending that Congress is engaged in, coupled with the border problems that we have. Let's at least not turn over our healthcare apparatus to folks from a United Nations or an international multilateral institution that has no concern for us. So I thank you for being here, and now I yield to the gentlelady from Wyoming, my friend Harriet Hageman.
Thank you. In my home state of Wyoming, we have common sense, something that seems to be sorely lacking in the Biden-Harris administration. Wyomingites that I have spoken with consistently ask why this administration would push to fund any organization that has clearly come under the control of the Chinese Communist Party. They wonder why Biden and Harris would try to enter into unconstitutional agreements with foreign entities that would force Americans to give up their sovereignty. It is worth noting that the bulk of the WHO's budget comes from voluntary contributions from multiple countries and organizations. Throughout the past decade, the United States has donated billions of taxpayer dollars, making us the WHO's largest financial contributor. Over this time, the CCP has exerted an expanded influence and corrupted the organization's data, research, and information sharing. Despite its abject failure, the organization is seeking greater control and greater funding while continuing to block legitimate investigations into the origins of COVID-19. On June 1st, the accord that amended the international health regulations was adopted by the World Health Assembly. While there are many concerning aspects of this accord, with its ceding of our sovereignty being at the top of the list, it obligates member states to address misinformation and disinformation. The result would be something that we have become all too familiar with under this administration: mandating, censoring, and sanctioning of speech and other actions that are at odds with the WHO Director General's deliberations. Of course, this is a clear violation of our constitutional rights, but Biden and Harris have never cared much for those. I have co-sponsored legislation introduced by Congressman Chip Roy, the No Taxpayer Funding for the World Health Organization Act, which would prohibit the U.S. from making any assessed or voluntary contributions to the WHO. International law does not trump the Constitution. Biden and Harris may be compromised by the CCP, but they cannot force Americans to follow laws and regulations not passed by our own federal government. Thank you, and with that, I cede to Ronnie Jackson.
Thank you. Well, I'd just like to start by saying, as a physician who's followed the WHO for many years now, in my time in government, during 3 presidential administrations, and now as my time as a member of Congress, I can tell you that the WHO in particular and the UN in general do not represent what's best for this country. In fact, they do everything they can to undermine us and defeat us. Look at what happened during COVID as a perfect example. During COVID, they lied to us, and they worked with China to cover up the origins of COVID. You have to ask yourself, do you really want, next time this happens, for the WHO to decide how taxpayer dollars in this country are spent, to decide what resources we are and are not eligible for, despite the fact that we overwhelmingly fund their operations? That's what you're going to get. And as my colleague, Mr. Good, pointed out, they can define an emergency in any way they want. And believe me, it will be creative, and it won't be a healthcare crisis again next time. It'll be something related to the climate or gun control or some other woke agenda that they have on their radar. This IHR treaty is nothing more than a redistribution of wealth and government control via global governance. This fits right into the communist and socialist ideology that defines today's Democrat Party in this country. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and their administration would like nothing more than to pass their responsibility to protect this country's health and livelihood to another country, many of which do not appreciate the United States, do not like the United States, and many of which are hostile to the United States. They would love nothing more than to pass this responsibility to these countries. I am a firm believer that from this point forward, we should never give another penny to the World Health Organization. They have not represented us well. They never have, and they never will. They are not an ally to this country. They are not an asset to this country. We should not be paying hard-earned taxpayer dollars for their efforts that are oftentimes against us. With regards to the United Nations, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think the best thing we could do for the United Nations is to go to New York and push the entire thing off into the East River. And with that, I turn it over to Tony Perkins from the Family Research Council. Thank you.
Thanks, Doc. Well, we're here today to rain on the WHO's parade as they march for power. I think the WHO, we were here about 6 months ago, similar press conference prior to their June meeting in Geneva, where they tried to gain international support for their pandemic accord, which they did not do. And I'm becoming convinced that the WHO thinks that the rest of us have brain fog from COVID, and they're just going to keep trying this over and over again. But the facts do not change. This is a global power grab. And when you look at the various aspects that this would touch, in particular that have been touched on, that are very concerning, is their focus on so-called disinformation. What we recently saw in Brazil with X is a prime example of what governments would be doing, being empowered by the WHO's pandemic accord, calling on governments to silence and censor dissenting voices. You know, in America, we cherish the First Amendment. We cherish our freedom, and we cherish our families. Both are endangered under this pandemic accord. And I echo the calls here today, number one, to defund the WHO and get the United States out of it. But secondly, any agreement that is advanced by this administration, signed on to, should be submitted to the Senate for ratification and be treated as it is, as a treaty. So I thank these members of Congress for continuing to bring attention to this. While many ignore it, the WHO continues their march for power, and they will not stop. And it's going to be incumbent upon this Congress, this institution, stopping and protecting the American public from the WHO. And with that, I turn it over. Is Chip here? Reggie Littlejohn.
Reggie Littlejohn, co-founder of Sovereignty Coalition and president of Anti-Globalist International. Thank you to Representatives Bob Good and Ralph Norman and my other colleagues here, including my co-chair, Frank Gaffney, for organizing this press conference. 1425 was an outstanding victory which can prevent the depredations of the World Health Organization from moving forward without Senate consent, but we need an equally strong measure in respect to the United Nations. The United Nations Pact for the Future is going to be the deliverable at the Summit for the Future, which is this weekend, and nobody knows about it. So in this Summit for the Future, they're going to approve a platform, an emergency platform that will operationalize automatically in the case of a complex global shock. What does it mean to operationalize automatically? It means that once they have passed it through the United Nations, they don't have to ask other countries to approve it. They will just go forward with their protocols. And how did they approve this? It's being adopted by something called the silence procedure. The silence procedure, this is a pact. A pact is a form of treaty. It's supposed to go through the ratification process internationally. Instead, they're doing it where they submit a draft, and if nobody objects to it, then it's adopted. Adopted. And then it's noted that it was adopted at the actual Summit for the Future. So this is absolutely unconstitutional. Not only that, it's against the Charter of the United Nations. They are trying to expand their powers. They're doing an end run around their own charter through the silence procedure. We need to raise the alarm about this, and we need to stop it. Thank you. Next one is Representative Eli Crane.
All right, thank you guys for coming out today to cover this. I want to say thank you to Congressman Good, Norman for hosting this, and my other colleagues for showing up. Obviously, this is a complete disaster. I'm not surprised at all that this administration is supporting it. They've completely betrayed us on our southern border, and it looks like they're attempting to sell out our sovereignty once again with this agreement. I just want to read what my colleague, Congressman Norman, read. This is from Gutierrez. I propose that the General Assembly provide the Secretary General and the United Nations system with a standing authority to convene and operationalize automatically an emergency platform in the event of future complex global shock of sufficient scale, severity, and reach. The key word there is authority. That's what these globalists want. They want authority. They want to strip it away from what we have here and the representatives that we have here that represent the people of this country, though none of them were elected by anyone in this country. And what do they want authority over? Because it's not just the next pandemic. All right, large-scale climate or environmental events. Wow, they could be real creative with that one. Future pandemics, high-impact events involving a biological agent, disruptions to global flows of goods, people, or finance, disruptive activity in cyberspace or disruption to global digital connectivity, major event in outer space, or black swan events. That's enough examples and enough reasons for them to get involved pretty much whenever and wherever they want to. And I hope that this body and the Senate continues to reject, push back, and stop this agreement and this push by this administration to sell out our sovereignty to globalists. Thank you. Next up is Chris Ullman, Eagle Forum.
Thank you so much. I'm Chris Ullman, the president of Eagle Forum. I'm delighted to be here. We're a grassroots organization of patriots who love this Constitution. Today is September 17th. Today is Constitution Day, the day when all Americans should study the Constitution and learn about it. And I am so grateful for this opportunity to have this press conference today when we're talking about the WHO and the UN and what they're trying to do to take our sovereignty away. And I'm grateful for these members of Congress who are standing up to do their constitutional duty, to be the legislative branch, to decide what our laws are and what laws the American people will live under. The United Nations and the WHO want to become the lawmaking body to tell us what to do. And these members of Congress last week took a step to say, no, it's our job to make the laws, not the UN and not the WHO. The Senate, there are 49 senators who have signed on to a companion bill that requires the same constitutional advice and consent. We have 26 governors who have also spoken out on this, as well as attorneys general. So we're delighted on Constitution Day that this body is taking the first step to get us back to constitutional order. Thank you very much, and now I turn it over to Representatives Norman and Good for questions.
Harry, two questions. Anybody? Yes, sir.
Well, I'd say what it has on future elections is bigger than that. It's what it has on the future of this country. I mean, this is a dictatorship. This is, this administration, by its actions when it first took office, had executive orders that were supposed to be temporary during the term of his office, like the border. It's, to reverse that, to walk that back, is going to take a massive effort. This will take the same massive effort. If he votes this in, does not take it to the Senate, we'll cede our sovereignty. We cannot do it. The American people do not want that. That's not what a democracy is all about, and particularly with China. China is our enemy, and to cede it to basically to them is unacceptable, particularly with the COVID virus.
I'll just add to what Congressman Norman said, that you saw the Biden-Harris administration on full display during the China virus situation, where they doubled down and took every recommendation from the WHO. We had to force them, literally, the Republican House had to force them to finally end the pandemic emergency and the so-called mitigation requirements that were in place. So hopefully the American people learned from that. They've suffered sufficiently, and they're going to make change on November 5. One more. All right.
One thing to that last point. When you talk about elections, the founders had a very important insight. You want people voting who are informed. We are here to talk to you and through you to the American people to ensure they are informed, because the process that we're talking about could functionally end the whole idea of limited, accountable, and representative governance of this country under our Constitution. That must not be allowed to happen. And I thank these gentlemen and their colleagues for trying to prevent it from happening.
Thank you all.
Thank you for tuning in one more time. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. You've heard the GOP senators say what they had to say. I'm not even going to say too much because they already said everything they're supposed to say. Because I do not want any sort of, because a lot of people have been reporting saying my content is hurting them. So I don't make this content or I don't stream these videos to hurt you guys. No, like that's not what I'm here for. I'm just here to share knowledge, share information, and let's learn from each other. Okay, let's learn from each other. All right. So as we all know, the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, actually went to the border. She went to the border, and some people are saying, why is she going to the border now? She was at the border in 2021, and now she visited the border. The question now that the voters are asking is, why is she visiting the border now? And people are saying, is it because of the election, or is it because she actually wants to make a change? You know, what do you think? Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. Okay, let me know what you think. I think it's good that she visited the border. However, it took too long, It took too long. Let's see what Fox has to say.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dagan McDowell, along with Miranda Devine, author of a new book, The Big Guy. You know what that's about. Plus, Griff Jenkins and Jason Chaffetz. Welcome to the Big Weekend Show. The big story tonight. Kamala finally deciding to go to the border on the eve of an election, staging a photo op along the border wall, and instead of taking ownership of her failures as the czarina of the border, she blames President Donald Trump.
There are consequential issues at stake in this election, and one is the security of our border. The United States is a sovereign nation, and I believe we have a duty to set rules at our border and to enforce them. These men and women who work there and at other places along our southern border help keep our nation secure. And they need more resources to do their jobs. And so even though Donald Trump tried to sabotage the border security bill, it is my pledge to you that as President of the United States, I will bring it back up and proudly sign it into law.
But wasn't she the one who wanted to abolish ICE and decriminalize all border crossings?
I think there's no question that we've got to critically re-examine ICE and its role and the way that it is being administered and the work it is doing. Let me just be very clear. We have to have a secure border, but I am in favor of saying that we're not going to treat people who are undocumented and cross the border as criminals.
Would you be committing to close immigration detention centers?
Absolutely, on day one. On day one.
This as devastating ICE data crashed her border visit before it even happened. Thousands of illegal aliens with sexual assault and murder convictions are right now roaming the United States. Border Patrol union boss says Kamala can fix the border right now if she wanted.
She's ignored the border completely. She was down there for less than 30 minutes over the problem that's been facing our nation for close to 4 years. The problem she created. Look, she's the vice president, right? And she hasn't done anything for 3.5 years. If she wanted to do anything at all, she would have done it. And as far as I'm concerned, she's still got a couple more months of being vice president. If she really is serious, she would do something now.
Earlier today at a campaign rally in Wisconsin, Trump agreed.
After 4 straight years of obliterating our border, I watched this show that she put on. 4 years of the most incompetent border anywhere in the world in history. Border czar Harris went to the border to lie in the most shameless and horrible way possible. Even yesterday when she was talking about how she's going to start getting very tough. Why didn't she do this 4 years ago?
Griff, that was you interviewing Art Del Cueto and that, but you also have been at the border from day one, with Fox being really, from the get-go, the only network covering this crisis.
You know, Dagan, put this into context. There is, according to this devastating ICE data, there are 425,000 criminals loose on the streets today that are not detained by ICE. 13,000 more of them are murderers, 15,000 convicted of sexual assault. But here's what you have to put into perspective. While DHS says, and we don't have the data for how many of the 400,000 crossed or entered the U.S. under the Biden administration as opposed to past administrations, and DHS is sort of pivoting to say, well, it's going back decades. Well, a decade ago, Dagan, Kate Steinle was killed when she was murdered, shot in the back on a pier in San Francisco in the summer of 2015. That's a decade ago. That was a major story because it was so rare. Today, we have a Kate Steinle every week, and that's why the poll numbers show Americans in every town, in every city, in every state are worried about this because of the glaring public safety risk to the communities in the U.S.
That was, Miranda, not a peep from Kamala Harris about the data that Griff was talking about, but not a peep about the Americans murdered and raped by the illegals coming across the border under her watch who should not be here. These are crimes that are being committed that should not have happened.
There's blood on Kamala Harris's hands. She's the border czar. She doesn't care. And I mean, the height of the woman to go down to the border and start blaming Donald Trump for the crisis that she's created. She has 4 more months as vice president. She could fix this tomorrow with executive orders. She could get Joe Biden, who seems incapable of doing anything, does whatever he's told, fix this problem. They could fix it tomorrow. She won't. She doesn't care. It's political. And I think Donald Trump was quite right when he said today that she should be resigning, not running for president. No politician who's responsible for this disaster, for the tragedy that has befallen a lot of families with being murdered or raped, their loved ones, and the future. I mean, this is going to be so difficult to somehow remove between 10 and 20 million illegal migrants from this country is going to tear the country apart. It's going to be very hard if Donald Trump wins to do this properly. It's a legacy that's been left for this country to suffer for generations to come. I cannot believe that she's getting away with this.
Yeah, it's intentional suffering and hardship that's been inflicted upon the American people. And it's not just the murder and the rape and the thievery and the mayhem, but it's also, Jason, economic, financial, educational, and a societal burden that will be borne by generations of Americans.
And how about the human trafficking? How about the fact that they can't find tens of thousands of minors that have come across the border illegally? But you're right. They tell us, oh, we're 10 million homes short in America. I wonder what the 10 to 20 million people that are here illegally have to do with the price of rising rents and everything else. They're taking health care. You go to a school in all these communities all across the country, and suddenly there's 6 kids in your class that can't speak English. That's going to slow down the whole process. But, you know, for 3 years, they told us the border's safe, it's secure. You had Alejandro Mayorkas, you had the Vice President Harris out there telling us it's secure. The White House, KGP would go out there and say, oh no, the border's secure. That was a complete, total fabrication and lie. They literally have millions of people that were gotaways that aren't accounted for in those numbers, and they have hundreds of thousands of people they put on airplanes and flew over our borders that aren't included in those numbers. So it's even worse than those numbers that they're putting up.
That parole program is still going on. They shut it down briefly because of the massive fraud that was in it. And there were 30,000 people who are flying in from Cuba, Nicaragua, Haiti and Venezuela. Oh, I'm sure that those migrants are being vetted by these nations that are run by gangs and communists. But let's look at why. Well, do we need a poll to know why that Kamala Harris went to Arizona? Check this out. Kamala Harris's 18-point lead among Hispanics narrowed in the recent Fox News poll, this is in Arizona, to just 11 points. Her 14-point edge among women down to 8 points, and what was a 13-point advantage, Griff, for Harris among voters under the age of 30 turned into a 12-point deficit. That is a 25-point shift. So leave it to her to do something that is transparent and craven.
I think some of these things tie together. I mean, look, she went to the border because they're seeing the drop in those numbers, full well knowing that Trump has the upper hand when it comes to the border issue of immigration for the obvious reasons. But you mentioned the CHMV program, and it's so important for people to understand the administration is now touting lower numbers. They had the highest numbers in history in this past December, more than 300,000 in 1 month. Now they're down to 120 and change in the most recent month. But while those numbers are lower, the fiscal year totals just over 2 million for this year, lower than last year. However, there's 1.3 million total, and stay with me on this math because you've got 530,000 coming under the CHMV controversial program. You got another 800,000 coming through that CBP One app, which is essentially the same migrants that simply apply on their app, come across, and then are released, the same as if they crossed. So they're actually increasing the numbers in the dots connect when you look at the communities like Springfield, a population 60,000 that now have 20,000 plus new residents. And that's why voters across all spectrums are upset about it, because aside from the safety risks, you've got simply unsustainable situations. The Ohio Attorney General is looking at ways to maybe challenge legally the powers of the federal government to bring such numbers through these legal pathways.
There is nary a peep from the media. Remember the media being just outraged about the cats and dogs comment, but about these numbers, about the murderers and rapists roaming in the United States, or the Wall Street Journal does have a piece about Whitewater, Wisconsin, a city of 15,000 with an influx of 1,000 Central Americans. There is zero outrage.
Zero outrage. Look, a couple of years ago, I went for the New York Post to Westchester Airport, about an hour north of Manhattan, and we waited at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning because we'd got a tip-off that there were planes, charter planes, flown by the government with illegal migrants on them being dropped off there. We watched them night after night, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris's secret migrant flights. They were met by 3 charter buses that had their brands blacked out, and then they were secreted away. A few people here, a few people there in the tri-state area. This was happening every single night for years across America. And that was how they hid the crisis at the border. There was no overcrowding at the border. As soon as people came in, they were whisked into every little tiny community, into Springfield, into Whitewater. Americans didn't know what happened to them until they woke up. Their schools were overloaded, their police were overloaded, housing prices were up. It's a disaster. In every corner of this country has become a border town.
Real quick, final word.
75% of the crimes committed in Manhattan here in New York City, people that are here illegally.
Yeah.
It's a choice. Kamala Harris is pro-crime. There's only one way to spin it. She is importing crime to the United States of America.
Why'd they do it? Flip Texas blue, and a Republican would never win the White House again.
Yep.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am an immigrant, okay? I came into this country legally, all right? You come through, you get checked by Homeland Security. You get checked. You have to get checked. And if you're trying to be a United States citizen, you have to study, do the test, do the exams, by USCIS, learn the Constitution, learn, and then take steps to become a United States citizen. Okay, this is what I love about the United States. You have the opportunity to do what's right instead of doing the wrong things. You are not going to come in here illegally and then expect to be, I don't know. You know what? People do what they do. I don't know what kind of situation they have going on in their countries, but as an immigrant, I came in here legally. And it took me 5 years. Absolutely. Just said you probably spent 5 years or more. Yes, it took me 5 years plus to become a United States citizen. Okay? It took me 5 years plus to become a United States citizen. And I'm thankful for it. I love the United States, and that's why I stream these videos. Okay? That's why I stream these videos. I had to learn. I had to take a test. Like every 2 years, I had to take a test. Then I took the final exams to become a United States citizen. So, man, if you want to come to the United States, if you want to become a United States citizen, I suggest you come here legally the right way and do what you're supposed to do so you can help your families. That's the right way. All right, so back to back, we're going to see what the GOP leaders are talking about in this next video. Let's get it.
Good morning. The American people are relieved that President Trump is safe following the unbelievable second assassination attempt in a period of weeks on his life. We as House Republicans extend our gratitude to the hardworking law enforcement officers who are working to keep President Trump, his family, and his team safe. However, we have to ask ourselves how this was possibly allowed to happen, not once, but twice. How were there 2 assassination attempts on President Trump in as many months? How were these armed and dangerous individuals allowed to get so close to the former president and current Republican presidential nominee and likely next president of the United States? And I want to point out, Democrats' violent statements have fueled this, like a very junior freshman member of the New York delegation who said about President Trump, he should be eliminated. It is uncalled for. You should call the Democrats out in the media for fueling this violence against President Trump. There must be a clear explanation of what happened this weekend in Florida, as well as answers for what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, and changes must be made to ensure this does not happen again. That's why we're so proud that the Speaker set up that committee and broadened it from not only the investigation into Butler, Pennsylvania, but also what happened this weekend in Florida as well. On Friday, we kicked off early voting, and Americans started to cast their votes in the most consequential election of our lifetime. The American people have to ask themselves one important question. Are you better off today than you were under President Trump? The answer is a resounding no. Because people understand our nation is in crisis. Kamala Harris and far-left Democrat policies have threatened the American way of life, making our nation weaker, less safe, and less prosperous. With 4 years in office, Kamala Harris has failed to deliver results for the American people. We had the strongest economy in history under President Trump, the most secure border in modern history, and a peace through strength foreign policy that brought global security. President Donald Trump is the leader the American people need to bring them out of the crises created by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Look at where we are today, the highest rate of inflation in my lifetime. And Kamala Harris was the deciding vote for Joe Biden's Inflation Expansion Act, the most wide open and dangerous border in modern history, in history of our country. That's because Kamala Harris failed as Joe Biden's open borders are. And take a look around the world. You have the catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan, where Kamala Harris was the last person in the room with Joe Biden. You have Putin invading Ukraine, and of course the deadly terrorist attack against Israel on October 7th by Hamas. Lastly, since this is a political press conference, I want to touch on the bombshell report from the Associated Press. In key targeted districts across the country, Democrats are illegally interfering in elections by recruiting shadow candidates to deceive voters and disrupt the will of the American people. These are blatant and unconstitutional attempts to undermine our democracy and election integrity. And we are joined today by 2 of those districts that the Democrats have illegally targeted. That's Congresswoman Jen Kagan from Virginia and Congressman Zach Nunn from Iowa. These are amazing members of Congress and combat veterans who represent districts where these Democrats are trying to undermine elections and are undermining our elections. And these districts have been directly impacted by far-left Democrat policies of Kamala Harris as well. I want to first turn it over to Zach Nunn from Iowa's 3rd District.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you, Elise. My name is Zach Nunn. I represent Iowa's 3rd District, and today I'd like to share briefly a story of a man from Iowa with a brain injury who was targeted by Democratic operatives to get his name on the ballot. Despite this man not even being able to drive, they recruited him, they targeted him over the course of a year, impersonating members of Congress, deceiving him that he was in direct conversations with Donald Trump so that he would run in a Make America Great style party to try and get on the ballot. In my home state of Iowa, Democrats who are on the ballot have said that they cannot win unless they have a spoiler on the ballot. That was just out this week. Tragically, they lied to him because they knew they could deceive him. They push-polled, paid for it. When he arrived in Des Moines, they picked him up in an electronic vehicle and then dropped him off at the Secretary of State's office. They handed him a pile of binders that had been paid and recruited for by a Democratic operative firm so that he could get his name on the ballot. They studiously avoided being on security cameras, and when he asked to have their picture taken together, they refused to take that photo. Democratic law firms notarized his information and handed it in to the Secretary of State. The only intent was to steal an election from Iowans. And as a combat veteran who, when I first ran, Democrats stole my military records, and we saw it happen time and time again with no punishment or even consequence by the Department of Justice, Democrats have stepped up their game to use truly shady tactics that not only are a direct threat to our democratic institutions in Iowa, but they are trying to manipulate and deceive Iowans. And this is where I draw the line. When you try to steal an election in my state, we fight back. We've exposed them, and I'm grateful for the AP's investigative story. These are not my words. This is their investigation into what a shady Democratic firm has done to try and steal an American election by putting false flag candidates on the ballot. Now, in our case, as a counterintelligence officer, we were successful. But this threat has not abated. And tragically, we have seen in states like Minnesota, Montana, and with my dear friend Jen Kiggins in Virginia, their attempts are real, they are paid for by independent expenditures, and they are operated in the shadows by firms directly tied to Democrats. So whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, this does not matter. Everyone should universally say these tactics are illegal, they are unacceptable, and they must be stopped. We must all work together to call out this type of deceit, because when I worked in Eastern Europe and saw Putin's playbook on how they distorted elections in real democracies, they were effective. That cannot happen here, no matter whose party it is. So with that, I'd like to introduce my great friend, Jen Kiggins from Virginia. Jennifer.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Congresswoman Jen Kiggins. I proudly represent Virginia's 2nd Congressional District. Once again, Democrats are resorting to shady tactics rather than talking about issues that are important to Americans. This week, an AP News story shed light on Democrat-aligned firm who not only scouted but also collected signatures for and helped a third-party candidate on the ballot against me in Virginia's 2nd Congressional District. The games they are playing in my race are unfortunately not isolated to my district, and this is happening in other competitive races throughout the country. My message to Democrats is this: your shady and deceitful interference in this election will not deter nor detract my mission of taking care of this country and securing America's success. While Democrats pretend to be defenders of democracy, they've proven yet again that they will resort to lying and cheating in an attempt to trick voters. They know that they cannot beat me in a fair fight straight up on my record and policy priorities, so they resort to unethical and shady tactics like this. Make no mistake, the voters of Virginia's 2nd District will not be fooled. They know the Democrats cannot run on their failed priorities that have resulted in record inflation, an open border, less safe communities, and a weakened America on the world stage. Democrats need to know this as well. I am not intimidated nor deterred, and will continue to fight for our country to serve her in this capacity, holding this elected office, and will lead with integrity and truth, something they obviously do not understand. There's no place for this type of unethical behavior in politics, and Democrats should be ashamed of themselves. I served this nation in uniform for 10 years, took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America, and will continue to fight for all that makes our country the greatest in the world. Thank you so much. And it's a privilege to introduce our whip, Congressman Tom Emmer.
Thanks, Jen. It's unacceptable, as Elise was talking about, that when we now refer to the assassination attempt against President Trump, we have to clarify which one. Republicans, Democrats, and all Americans should be outraged by what's happened. The American people deserve answers, and I have full faith that the House's bipartisan task force will get to the bottom of this. Meanwhile, the sitting president of the United States has said President Trump needs to be put in a, quote, bullseye. Kamala Harris continuously calls President Trump, quote, a threat. And Congressman Dan Goldman, as was referred to earlier, has even called for President Trump to be eliminated. But that's not what you're hearing about from the mainstream media. Why? In fact, NBC News had the audacity to call the second attempt on President Trump's life in 2 months a mere golf club incident. And the mainstream media seriously wonders why Americans' trust in you has fallen to historic lows. Needless to say, Democrats' so-called leaders and the partners in the media need to get a grip. And the Secret Service can and should do more to protect President Trump. We cannot normalize what has happened to an American president and our current Republican nominee. Just look at what Donald Trump has been through. From the Russia hoax to sham impeachments and indictments to 2 attempts on his life in just 2 months. It's incredible that President Trump has come out on the other end of all of this with motivation to keep fighting. To me, Donald Trump is the patriot of the 21st century. He will never surrender, nor should he. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our leader, Steve Scalise.
Well, thank you, Whip. And before I talk about that, we have a very busy agenda on the floor this week, and the Speaker will talk about some of that, especially the CR with SAVE Act. But today, one of the other bills we're going to be voting on is a bill that says if someone is here illegally and they assault a woman, we've seen people come here illegally and murder women. And that seems like the only time where some of these woke prosecutors will actually arrest the illegal. But there's so many other horrible things being done to women by illegals. The bill says if they assault.
Thank you for tuning into the live show. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. If you're voting for the 45th and you think it's going to be the 47th, one thing I have to tell you is please, please pray. Pray for this man. That's all I can say. And if you're voting for Kamala, also pray. That's all I can say. Because it's freedom of, it's your right to vote. Freedom to vote for whoever you want to vote for. I'm not here to sway you to vote for Trump or sway you to vote for Kamala. Vote for whoever you want to vote for. It is your right. Just make sure you pray, okay? Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. Let's get it. However, I am voting for the 45th. I'm voting for Donald Trump because gas prices were affordable, groceries were affordable, the border was safer, there was no new wars, we didn't have to talk about Ukraine and Russia. You know what I mean? Like opportunity zones, HBCU funding. You know what I mean? Like First Step Act. There's a lot of stuff we could keep talking about, but it is what it is, man.
A woman in any kind of way, it's a deportable offense. Now, I'm curious to see how this vote's going to be. Everybody on the House floor should vote for that bill. But if any Democrat dare vote against it, they're going to have to explain to people back home who are watching this be carried out in every community in America why they would rather stand with illegals than women in their own districts that they represent. That's going to be today. Tomorrow, we're going to continue moving forward on our agenda, continue going after wokeness, continue to stand up for families who are struggling. And then Friday, we're going to be bringing a few bills. One, CRA on tailpipes. Kamala Harris, has always been for eliminating the combustion engine and mandating EVs. Her values haven't changed. That's what she's been for her whole life. And it's crushed thousands of jobs in states like Michigan. So John James from Michigan, who has seen the devastation of these horrible policies coming out of the Biden-Harris administration, is bringing a bill to reverse that, to end that mandate on the tailpipe emission, which was designed to kill the combustion engine, fossil fuel cars, in exchange for mandating EVs. People don't even want to buy the EV cars. The batteries are made in China, and yet they continue their drumbeat. So we're going to stand up for American workers Friday in that vote. But one of the last votes we're going to have, this is what I really want to talk about, is a bill by Mike Lawler that will ensure that both nominees for president, not just Donald Trump, also Kamala Harris, get the same level of Secret Service protection as the President of the United States. As has been talked about by so many already, it's unacceptable that now we're at 2 assassination attempts on President Trump. And luck cannot be a strategy by the Secret Service to have stopped these attempts. He came within inches, as we all know, on the first assassination attempt where shots actually rang out. If not for the advanced Secret Service agent seeing that muzzle just barely coming through a chain link fence, we may have been talking about something very different right now. Luck cannot be a strategy. Clearly, I think there's divine intervention. I know the speaker has said that too. But at the same time, the Secret Service has to do better. And keep in mind, as we talk about adding this extra protection, every year since 2017, Congress has added more money to the Secret Service's budget than they even requested in their budget. And so it's not an issue of money. What they're doing with the money, we've had a lot of serious questions about before the first assassination attempt. You know, trying to carry out a woke agenda, focusing on the wrong things and forgetting their main mission, and that is to protect presidents and vice presidents in the United States. The Secret Service has to shift that focus and shift their priorities and provide this protection. But now I'm going to be very specific, because we talk about the rhetoric. And when there's an incident like this, there's always talk that the rhetoric needs to dial down. And I'm one of those who says it too. But this isn't generic. There is very specific rhetoric we can now point to that we know is triggering some of these people who are unhinged, who take it the wrong way and want to carry out what is being sent to them by Democrats talking about this. We all know Kamala Harris, her quotes, where she says, Trump, quote, Trump is a threat to our democracy and fundamental freedoms. She said this over and over again. Not just before the first attempt, even after the first attempt on President Trump's life, there might have been a 2 or 3 day pause, and then they went right back to it. In fact, just days before the second assassination attempt, Kamala Harris made that quote. And then the second attempted shooter, he was regurgitating the same language as Kamala. So this is no longer a dog whistle, which it's been on the left. It's now being received by some unhinged people as a call to action when Democrats say this. Kamala needs to stop saying that President Trump is a threat to democracy. There are unhinged people that are taking that as a call to go and try to eliminate President Trump. She needs to stop it. Now, leadership starts at the top, and then you've got to go down. President Biden has said that as well, along with the quotes, and you've heard it from others. It's important to repeat. President Biden, quote, it's time to put Trump in a bullseye. The President of the United States said that, and then two different people have taken that as a call to action. Where is the real scrutiny coming from the press to ask them, do you now denounce what you said? Because people are taking it the wrong way and are actually trying to carry it out. It's not just rhetoric. We almost lost President Donald Trump. And it shouldn't happen on either side. But you're seeing this language from the other side get higher and higher. Got to say it again. Congressman Goldman, quote, it is destructive to our democracy, and he, President Trump, has to be eliminated. Does anybody need an interpretation of that? One unhinged person hearing that, and what does that mean to them? That they're going to carry out as a call to action what they're being called to do. Cannot happen. It cannot happen. Congresswoman Plaskett, quote, Trump needs to be shot. Has she been scrutinized on that quote? Are other Democrats being asked to call her out and stop doing that kind of thing that is being taken the wrong way? I've seen it personally. When people are called to action, one person is all it takes to take it the wrong way and then look at what could be. We don't want this to happen again, but the Democrats that are saying this, starting with Kamala Harris, have to stop the language they're saying. Talk about your policy differences, but stop all of this language about threats to democracy and Hitler comparisons, and he needs to be shot. Enough is enough. With that, I want to bring up the Speaker of the House.
Thank you so much. Sorry about the heat and humidity in here. That's Steve's fault. He's from Louisiana. Listen, we're 8 days out from the election, and we are continuing, the Republicans are continuing to draw the contrast between our agenda of liberty, opportunity, and security for everybody and the Democrats' destructive agenda and their radical left policies. You will see that on display on the House floor this week and in the weeks ahead. In the meantime, let me give you just a quick update on the second assassination attempt. The second assassination attempt. It sounds surreal to say so. As fate would have it, my wife Kelly and I were at Mar-a-Lago to meet with President Trump. We were supposed to meet earlier after the shooting attempt. We joined him immediately thereafter. We spent almost 3 hours with the president. I'll just tell you, and you may have heard my personal reflection on this, he was completely unrattled by the experience. Donald Trump is a strong individual, and he's a strong leader. And I don't think anyone can argue the case that there's been anyone, and certainly in the modern political era, probably throughout our history, who's been so aggressively attacked, and yet he remains so resolute and so committed to keep fighting for the American people. And I was very inspired by that. And I know that we all understand we've got to get down to the bottom of this. The Secret Service has dropped the ball, and it's inexcusable. We have a task force that has been investigating the events of Butler, Pennsylvania. As our conference chair, Lee Stefanik, noted, we're going to expand the scope of the task force to look into the events that happened in Florida on Sunday as well. We have got to get down to the bottom of this. We've got to ensure that this doesn't happen again. If they need additional funding, Congress will supply that. But we're told it's a manpower problem. Even if we gave them $3 billion tomorrow, it's impossible to hire 2,500 new Secret Service agents in a short period of time. We are less than 50 days out from the election. We need Donald Trump to be protected, as any candidate of his stature would be. I called the White House yesterday. I made a demand to the White House, President Biden, supply for President Trump the same degree of protection that a sitting president has. He's a former president. I believe he's going to be the next president. And right now, he's a candidate under the greatest threat of any candidate in modern political history. It justifies that level of protection. I think the White House, I hope the White House will see the wisdom in that, and I hope that they'll do everything they can, because the buck stops at the White House, in the Oval Office, and President Biden has an obligation of that. Third, and finally, I don't want to reiterate what's been said so clearly and concisely here, but everybody needs to turn down the rhetoric. You just heard the selection of quotes, the threats that have been made by leading Democrats in this country. It is inexcusable and it is dangerous. It is leading people to be triggered. When members of Congress or the nominee for president of the Democratic Party says that President Trump must be eliminated, or that he's a threat to democracy, or they compare him to Hitler, there are people who are unstable, and it makes them do crazy things. This is common sense. Let's apply common sense. Let's have a vigorous debate on the policy differences, on the records, but let's turn the rhetoric down, because we're not going to be able to sustain that. Also this week, you heard from our dear colleagues here. The AP uncovered the latest example of election interference by the Democratic Party. Certain Democrats, the Patriot Run Project is what it's called. Everybody needs to look more deeply into this. Secret group connections to the Democratic political firms and liberal donors has been trying and been preying on independent candidates with disabilities or tragic life stories. You heard Congressman Nunn talk about the situation in his district. They're trying to register these people as third-party candidates and siphon votes away from Republicans in swing seats. This is dirty politics. It's unethical, it's immoral, it's illegal, and it must be stopped. No one should have to cheat to win an election. We want a free, fair, and safe election. We have to do everything within our power to make sure that happens. We know for a fact that this has impacted seats across the country. Our Republican incumbents like Marionette Miller Meeks in Iowa, Don Bacon in Nebraska, Ryan Zinke in Montana, Jen Kiggins in Virginia, who you heard from this morning, they've been the targets of this. And in Minnesota, too, we know that they have worked to boost Democrat Angie Craig. It's unacceptable. The American people ought to call it out. It's unethical. Play by the rules, Democrats. Play by the rules. We're going to win this fair and square, and we're going to make sure. There's another election interference effort the Republicans are fighting right now, and that is to make sure that non-citizens are not allowed to vote in the election. And that is why we're bringing the SAVE Act again to the floor today. We're attaching it to the continuing resolution. Why are we doing that? It's very simple. Congress has two very important assignments right now, immediately to be done. One is to make sure the government is funded, and the second is to make sure our elections are secure. I've been traveling the country nonstop. As of last weekend, I've done campaign events in 206 cities across 39 states, 40 states, I think now. I lose count. Every single public setting, when we turn to audience questions in these big gatherings, the first or second question, almost without exception, in every city, every town, every place in the country is, What about the election? Can we count on it? Is it going to be free and fair and safe? We have to guarantee that. Congress has a role at the federal level to make sure federal elections are secure. It is against federal law for non-U.S. citizens to vote in U.S. elections. But we have no mechanism right now to ensure that in the states because they're not allowed to ask for proof of verification of citizenship when someone registers to vote. We've had a number of states already do audits. They found thousands of illegals already on the rolls. This is a serious problem because some of our elections are decided by razor-thin margins, and everyone in this room and the Hill Press Corps knows. Marionette Miller-Meeks won her first race in 2020 by 6 votes. Her nickname around here is Six Pack because of that. We had members, John Duarte in California won by just over 200 votes his first time. If you have a small percentage of the millions and billions of illegals who came over the border in the last 4 years under border czar Kamala Harris's policies, they could throw an election. They could throw the majority of the House. It could affect the presidential race. It's very, very serious stuff, and that's why we're going to do the right thing. We're going to responsibly fund the government, and we're going to stop the non-citizens voting in elections. Last thing, this is Woke Week. On the floor this week, you're going to see a number of bills that expose the Democrats' woke agenda that's hurting our students and our banks and our country at large. House Democrats have consistently embraced the DEI, anti-energy, and anti-American nonsense, and the American people are fed up with it. So we want our banks to be fiduciaries, not social justice warriors. We want our schools to be places of education, not indoctrination. So we're going to be voting on bills to keep our banks, banks, and our schools, schools. I think that's common sense. We'll also vote to deport illegal aliens who commit violence against women and children. These are monsters that have no place in America. And finally, we'll tell sanctuary cities that the federal government will not bail out their dangerous policies. With that, we'll take a couple questions.
The former president last week posted that if you are unable to get what you want in what he calls election security, then you should in no way, shape, or form move forward with the continuing resolution. So are you going to listen to Donald Trump if you don't pass this with the SAVE Act tonight?
No, look, President Trump and I have talked a lot about this. We've talked a lot about it with our colleagues. We're building consensus on the plan. We all believe that election security is of preeminent importance right now. In fact, we demonstrated this. We put the SAVE Act on the floor, as you all know, in the summer. We passed it with only 5 Democrats voted in favor of that. 198 House Democrats voted against the SAVE Act. Remember, all the SAVE Act does is guarantee that only citizens can participate in the election. We're going to give them another chance. We're going to let them try to vote with us to secure the elections, and we'll see how that goes. That's the play we're running.
But to follow up on Manu's question, would you listen to Trump and let the government shut down? This bill's not going to pass, likely. There's over 10 Republicans that said they're going to vote against it. So, will you let the government shut down?
We'll see what happens with the bill. All right, we're on the field in the middle of the game. The quarterback's calling the play. We're going to run the play. I'm very confident. I know that all the Republicans believe in election security. We have some people who dislike CRs. You know what? I dislike continuing resolutions as well, right? But here's the problem, and everybody needs to remember, it is not the House. It is not the House majority. It is not House Republicans that put us in this situation. We ran all of our 12 appropriations bills through committee. They did an extraordinary job, our appropriators. We funded over almost 73% of federal spending off the House floor in complete and total votes. The process bogged down. You know why? Because Chuck Schumer and the Senate have not put one approach bill on the floor. They have not even begun to do their job. So here we are at the fiscal cliff at the end of the fiscal year. September 30th is right upon us. We don't have 2 sets of bills, as is supposed to be the system, for the House and Senate to go and negotiate together because the Senate brings nothing to the table. So it is the Senate that has put us in the situation to have a CR to not shut the government down, to not discontinue all government services. We are the responsible governing party here, and we are doing the right thing. The right thing right now, by principle, by law, by the Constitution, is to ensure that our elections are secure. That's the #1 concern, I think, for most of the American people. It's an 88% issue on the latest polling. It's not even a partisan issue. So we are going to force that with the last train leaving the station, which is the CR, and we'll see what happens. Chad.
Thank you. You passed multiple interim spending bills, CRs, late last year, early this year. Again, there's been suggested here this bill might not pass. Are you characterize what your concern though is? If you say I'm not going to have a plan B, I'm sticking to this. But if that bill fails, then what that means for you later in the year, if you have to go and negotiate with Democrats or something that comes from the Senate?
We do the right thing day by day, and we have a thick playbook, of course, with all sorts of ideas in it. But when you're on the field and you're calling a play, you run the play.
This is 2 weeks. That's not expanding the play.
You asked me what concerns me, Chad. I'll tell you this. What concerns me is having the smallest majority in U.S. history, you know, with our 1-vote margin for 5 months and still operating with a 3 or 4 vote margin on any given day. The solution is for us to grow the majority. And I'm so glad you're here in our building today. We could talk about politics. We feel very bullish that we're going to get that done. In fact, you know, all the pollsters and everyone who looks at this, the prognosticators give us the edge. We're going to run like we're 10 points behind, but we have the greatest stable of candidates that we've recruited that are in the field, many of them here today, that are going to help us get that job done. They're going to make my job a lot easier, Chad, because we're going to have a bigger margin and we won't have to do this all the time. Also, I'm going to tell you this, and I'll commit this to you. In the first part of next year, when we have unified government, when the Republicans are delivered the levers of power and we have the White House, the Senate, and the House again, we're going to govern responsibly. We are going to do 12 separate appropriations bills. We're going to follow the timeline that's prescribed by the statutes in the days and years ahead. We're going to get back to the role that Congress is supposed to play, so we're not up against these deadlines and we don't have to talk about continuing resolutions. We need the Senate to do it as well. And I'm confident when they deliver the Republican majority, they'll get back to that role as well. We'll do it in a bicameral fashion, and we'll return good governance to the people, and that's what this is about. I'll leave you with this thought. In the room upstairs, we had all of our candidates incumbents there. We had a great, I'd call it a pep rally. I mean, people are in a very good mood, very encouraged, very enthusiastic, as are the donors around the country. And I don't know if this has been said anywhere, but we just collected upstairs almost $10 million additional dollars from members in the NRCC. We're as motivated as the donors are to save this country, and that's what we're about. I'm so grateful for this leadership team. Thank you.
Thank you one more time for tuning in. Thank you. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. We have over 1,000 people watching right now. Double tap your screen right now, like that, like the live show. Okay, so if you are affected by Hurricane Helene, the President of the United States just gave a speech about the response effort. He is bringing together for the people that have been affected by Hurricane Helene, like myself. I am at an Airbnb right now because where I stay, somewhere in Georgia, was messed up by the hurricane, so we had to move out. No power. According to Georgia Power, our power would be back on. Electricity would be back on between October 5th and October 10th. So I had to take my family. I drove 2 hours away from home to stay somewhere at an Airbnb where we have power. So hopefully everything gets back together back home. I'm just praying for everybody right now. If you're being affected by Hurricane Helene, may God be with you and your family. Electricity, power, water, shelter. Man, it's not easy. I just hope you guys are okay. All right, let's listen to what the president has to say about the Hurricane Helene response.
Hello, folks. Good morning. To state the obvious, over the weekend, with devastating storms in the South. I spoke for a couple hours with leaders yesterday affected by this hurricane, and Governor Kemp of Georgia, Governor Cooper of North Carolina, county officials in the Big Bend region of Florida, and other leaders in South Carolina and Tennessee about the broad and devastating impacts of Hurricane Helene. It's not just a catastrophic storm, it's a historic, history-making storm. The entire Southeast and Appalachia. Damage from the hurricane stretches across at least 10 states. Winds over 120 miles an hour in some places. Storm surges up to 15 feet and record flooding. Communities are devastated. Loved ones waiting, not sure if their loved ones are okay, as they can't contact them because there's no cell phone connections. Many more folks displaced with no idea when they'll be able to be returned to the home, if ever, if there's a home to return to. So we're keeping them all in our prayers, and all the lives lost, and those particularly unaccounted for. There's nothing like wondering, is my husband, wife, son, daughter, mother, father alive? And many more who remain without electricity, water, food, and communications. And whose homes and businesses have washed away in an instant. I want them to know we're not leaving until the job is done. I also want you to know I'm committed to traveling to the impacted areas as soon as possible, but I've been told that it would be disruptive if I did it right now. We will not do that at the risk of diverting or delaying any of the response assets needed to deal with this crisis. My first responsibility is to get all the help needed to those impacted areas. And I expect to be there. Excuse me, I have a cold. I expect to be there later this week. I and my team are in constant contact with the governors, mayors, and local leaders. The head of FEMA, Deanne Griswold, is on the ground now in North Carolina. She's going to stay in Asheville and Appalachia region for the foreseeable future. There's been reports of over 100 dead and consequence of this storm, and there are reports of up to 600 people unaccounted for because they can't be contacted. God willing, they're alive, but there is no way to contact them again because of the lack of cell phone coverage. I've directed my team to provide every available resource as fast as possible to your communities to rescue, recover, and to begin rebuilding. In addition to FEMA, it includes the Federal Communications Commission to help establish communications capability, the National Guard, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Department of Defense are going to provide all the resources at its disposal to rescue and assist in clearing debris and delivering life-saving supplies. So far, that's over 3,600 personnel deployed. That number is growing by the day. I quickly approved requests from governors of Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Virginia, and Alabama for an emergency declaration. And I approved additional requests for the governors of North Carolina, Florida, South Carolina, and for a disaster declaration to pay for debris removal and provide financial assistance directly to survivors. FEMA and the Small Business Administration are there to help the residents whose homes and businesses were literally destroyed, washed away, or blown away. And the federal search and rescue teams have been working side by side with state and local officials and partners in very treacherous conditions to find those who are missing. And they'll not rest until everyone's accounted for. I want to thank all the first responders and everyone who's been working around the clock. One of the brave teams who's volunteered to be there is from San Diego County Fire Department, set to travel all the way from California to North Carolina to help. But on their way, they were in a terrible car accident in Louisiana. We pray for their full recovery, but it was a bad accident. We know there's more to do, and we'll continue to surge resources, including food, water, communications, and life-saving equipment. We'll be there, as I said before, and I mean it, as long as it takes to finish this job. Let me close with this. As president, I've seen firsthand the devastating toll that disasters like this take on families and communities. I've been on the ground in many disaster areas since I've been president. Excuse me, and I've heard dozens of stories from survivors about how it feels to be left with nothing, not even knowing where or when to get back on track. I'm here to tell every single survivor in these impacted areas that we will be there with you as long as it takes. For the sake of yourselves, and your families, I urge everyone returning to their communities and home to listen to the local officials and follow all safety instructions. Take this seriously. Please be safe. Your nation has your back, and the Biden-Harris administration will be there until the job is done. God bless you all, and I'm thinking of those that are still wondering where your loved ones are. Thank you.
We need to supplemental to help the people in the Southeast, Mr. President.
Say again?
We need to ask Congress for a supplemental.
That's my expectation, yes.
You know, roughly how much you're thinking?
Not yet. It's been this is a historic storm. It's devastating. They've never seen anything like this before. And some of them are back-to-back, 3 storms in a row. So it's really, really devastating.
Would you consider asking Congress to come back for a special session to pass a supplemental?
That is something I may have to request, but no decision has been made yet.
Do you have a sense of where you'll go when you are able to go, sir?
Yes, I told the governor of North Carolina I'd go down, and I expect to be down there by Wednesday or Thursday. It would be clear for me to go. You guys have traveled with me. You know, there's an entourage. This can be disruptive.
Is there a mistake for President Trump to be down there today in Georgia? Is that disruptive?
I don't have any idea.
On another issue, on the other side of the world in the Middle East, it's our understanding...
I'm going to stick with this.
What's that?
I'm going to stick with this subject, but go ahead. I've
Well, it's just
thousand
the fact
Olympian.
that Israel may be now launching a limited operation into Lebanon. Are you aware of that? Are you comfortable with their plan?
I'm more aware than you might know, and I'm comfortable with them stopping. We should have a ceasefire now. Thank
Do
you.
you expect Iran to retaliate? On the hurricane, Mr. President, why weren't you and Vice President?
Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard from the President of the United States concerning Hurricane Helene. Hopefully you guys are staying safe. It is a devastating hurricane. Hopefully you guys are staying safe. All right, let's listen to what Terry Lake has to say about Kamala Harris' border visit.
Welcome back now to the border, the open border. On Friday, the vice president traveled to the southern border in Douglas, Arizona, calling for tougher border security measures, despite having an open border policy throughout the Biden-Harris administration that has seen more than 8 million people illegally enter America, hundreds on the terrorist watch list, thousands of others already having committed murder, as well as more than 2 million evading apprehension altogether, the gotaways who have disappeared into America without
Shout
a
out
trace.
to Leanne.
Immigration
Leanne,
and
I
Customs
see you.
Enforcement
Thank you for
revealing
tuning
this
in.
week to Texas Congressman Tony Gonzalez that more than 13,000 illegal immigrants convicted of murder are currently free in the United States and on ICE's non-detained docket. In a statement to Fox News, Homeland Security says this: the data in this letter is being misinterpreted. The data goes back decades. It includes individuals who are entered the country over the past 40 years or more, the vast majority of whose custody determination was made long before this administration. It also includes many who are under the jurisdiction or currently incarcerated by federal, state, and local law enforcement partners. Joining me now with more on the Biden-Harris border crisis is Arizona Senate candidate Carrie Lake and Art Del Cueto. He's the vice president of the National Border Patrol Council. Thanks very much for being here to you both. I want to get the facts on the ground. First off, Art, take this on. The DHS is saying, no. The 13,000 people who are in this country who are actually murderers already, that's being misinterpreted.
Well, I mean, I think it's just sweeping under the rug because the story came out, and you got to ask these individuals, where's anyone that you've allowed in the country? That's what you got to ask them. Where are all the people that have come in under this administration? Where are they? Have you kept track of them? And if they're going to come back and say, oh no, this is decades, well then you know what? They haven't been doing their job for decades, because where are all these individuals that they've allowed in the country? But again, I think it's just something, they're just trying to, change the focus on it and look at something, making you look at something else. But the issue is clear, and I think the American public understands that, and we just cannot afford 4 more years of this.
Yeah, I have the letter to Tony Gonzalez here, Carrie Lake, and basically they're saying that it's 13,000 people who have committed murder that are running free, 15,000 others who have committed rape. Your reaction to Kamala Harris's border visit in Arizona on Friday?
I found it despicable. She spent 20 minutes on the border. She's been the border czar, Maria, for almost 4 years now. And she came down, I think, to make her friends in the mainstream media happy so that they could finally say she visited the border. Spent 20 minutes staring down at her feet, standing next to the wall. And I was surprised she didn't call Joe Biden and say, we did it, Joe. We destroyed America, because that's exactly what they're attempting to do. And Art just mentioned it, 30,000 convicted rapists and murderers are roaming around in our country. What they didn't mention in that list was the number of terrorists that are in our country right now. We're living in dangerous times. They just discovered IEDs and other weapons right on the other side of the border in Arizona. And, you have to wonder, are those meant for some of the terrorists that are now roaming around? And what about the 325,000 children who've been trafficked over our border, who Kamala Harris and my opponent, Ruben Gallego, who's in lockstep with her, have lost track of? My opponent has been 100% voting with Kamala Harris. He's open borders. He calls the border wall dumb and stupid, and he said he would never, ever, ever put a penny into building it. And he is for these sanctuary cities. I was recently in New York. That city is a wreck right now, and you can blame it on illegal immigration. Even though they're not on the southern border, they're feeling the effects of it.
Yeah, Art, what about that? I mean, the children who have been missing and trafficked, what can you tell us about life on the ground there in Texas with this open border? What has been the impact?
Well, I think the impact has been felt across every single state, and obviously on the border states. People, this is the problem. They haven't kept track of anyone coming through the border, and now we're seeing it out in California. A lot of these children that are being trafficked into the country, they're coming across, and we're getting reports that they're coming with melatonin. So the traffickers are giving these children melatonin, putting them to sleep. That way they don't make noise as they're coming into the United States. So it just makes it even worse. And look, Carrie Lake and myself, we've been accused many times of saying, oh, you know, they're spreading fear for no reason. You've heard it said, every state's a border state. Carrie and myself, we live in an actual border state. Tucson sector is at the very top of the list when it comes to encounters. And I can tell you right now, if this administration is given 4 more years after the chaos that they've created in the time they've already been here, they're going to feel empowered and they're going to realize, hey, we don't need to do anything, just continue what we're doing because people don't care. The American public has to care. They have to show it come election time, because if we have 4 more years of this, I do not believe we'll ever recuperate. It's going to be devastating, and we will not recuperate in this country for many, many decades to come, and certainly we will never recuperate within our own lifetime.
I want to hit on that when we come back. I want to look at the future. We're talking with Arizona Senate candidate Carrie Lake and National Border Patrol Council Vice President Art Del Cueto. We'll be back with more on Sunday Morning Futures. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm back with Arizona Senate candidate Carrie Lake and National Border Patrol Council Vice President Art Del Cueto. Art, what about this Tren de Aragua gang? Finally, we're seeing some arrests, but they are raging across Colorado, New York, Texas. How significant is this gang? What are they doing?
Well, so look, you've only seen what they've allowed you to see. That's what the problem is. Under the administration, you know, they've been able to import so many criminals in so many different entities. But Tren de Aragua, it's kind of like the Mara Salvatrucha on steroids. These people, they don't care. And the reason you continue to see, you know, the devastation is because there's no consequences. There hasn't been any consequences for any of these criminals the entire time that this administration has been in power. And you're going to continue to see them come across because no one's stopping them. All they have to do is come across, ask for asylum, and they get released. And they all know that. So they're going to continue to come in. And you mentioned the big cities, but you know what? They're in a lot of other cities as well. We just haven't seen the impact to the effect that we've seen in areas like Colorado, Chicago, and New York. But they're all over the U.S. right now.
This is why immigration is the #1 issue for voters. How confident are you, Carrie Lake, of a free and fair election, transparent and fair election in November? Real quick.
Well, I hope we have one. I mean, if we can just have a little more fair, then I think we can win, because the people have had it up to here with this nonsense. I'm running against a guy who's not going to confront the cartels. He will coddle them.
I'm Steve Doocy.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is sad, sad news. I got a family. I got a 4-year-old daughter. I don't want anything bad to happen to my daughter. I don't really care about myself because I'm a man. I should be able to handle myself. But I got 2 girls. I got 2 girls in the house, okay? So, you know, I got to make sure my girls are good. I don't really care about myself because, you know, it is what it is for us men, all right? But if I got 2 girls that I got to watch over, provide, and protect for, you know, I know God is the ultimate protector of our family, but still, we trust the people leading to lead us to the right path, you know, to protect the country. That's what a leader should do, protect and provide for his people that is leading. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know, man. I don't know. That's all I can tell y'all, man. I don't know. Anyway, so, ladies and gentlemen, also, there is this news looming around. There's this news looming around that there may be strike coming up. There may be a strike coming up at the port. I don't know. This is something that the port people are talking about. Let's listen to Fox Business talk about the strike that may happen. It's not certain right now, but it may happen. Let's get it.
Well, here we go. Tens of thousands of port workers from Maine to Texas set to strike when the clock strikes midnight tonight. This all happening over a pay dispute. The International Longshoremen's Association, they're demanding a 77% pay raise increase over 6 years. They want more guarantees. Their industry is not going to be upended by the addition of automation. Last night, the ILA confirming its workers will be striking. Now, this strike could cost the economy up to $5 billion per day and lose more than $7 billion in GDP per week for the U.S. economy. President Biden yesterday again saying he will not stand in their way. Watch.
Mr. President, would you intervene in the dock workers' strike if they go on strike on Tuesday?
No,
Why not?
because it's collective bargaining. I don't believe in Taft-Hartley.
Joining me now, American Trucking Association's President and CEO Chris Spear. Chris, good morning to you. Give us your assessment of where we are right now. It seems that the negotiations are at a standstill.
Thank you for tuning in one more time. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. I see people in the chat saying the economy is booming right now. It's rocking. Check your 401k. 401k is for retirement. It's not something that even if it's booming, you don't use it because it's meant for when you grow old and gray and then you're just chilling for retirement. So what does retirement fund has to do with daily activity, daily spending? This is the port. The port. They're saying they want to go on strike. That means all your grocery stores, who is going to bring this stuff into the grocery stores? The truckers, who is going to bring it to the grocery stores? This product, who is going to bring it to these mega grocery stores? Because you keep saying the economy is booming right now. Because of 401k, something that is only meant for retirement. Man, double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. Y'all wildin', man.
They are, Cheryl. Thanks for having me on. Listen, we're less than 18 hours out, and this president's saying it's collective bargaining. Well, that's true if they've actually been to the table. They haven't met since June. I mean, where is the leadership here? We've got Southeast United States, half of North Carolina, parts of Georgia, Southern Virginia that are underwater or under mud digging out. These people need help. And now we're going to shut down 36 ports. All the commerce going in and out of this eastern half of the country, 46% of all agriculture is exported out of our East Coast ports. This is not the time for a strike. This administration needs to get these parties to the table and get a deal. They're derelict. They're not anywhere near this negotiation. So this needs to get called out, and I appreciate you shedding light on it.
Well, obviously the supply chain, and I'm glad that you brought up the point, especially for the state of North Carolina right now, which is just facing mass devastation from Hurricane Helene. Let's talk about your association. You're moving over 72% of the nation's freight by tonnage. You're saying 46% of containerized agricultural exports to parts, again, you just mentioned that, from these East Coast ports. So let's talk about the kinds of foods that are in the products that are in those containers. You mentioned the number, but give me some specific examples, because as you're saying, these are crucial supplies that need to go to these eastern states.
Well, absolutely. Let's start with farmers. Let's start with agriculture. The things that are going to perish first are fruit, produce. You know, we've got meat, poultry. We've got everything from soybeans to cotton. All these things in the first week are going to be the products that are going to show up on the shelves first. As you go second week, third week, fourth week out, you're looking at things that are going to show up on the shelves at Christmas time. So this is not, you know, the sequence you want going into an election. You know, this is really a disaster in the making, and literally we're less than 18 hours out, and these parties have not talked for 3 months.
We again, 12:01 Tuesday morning, when the clock strikes midnight, that's when they say they are going to walk out, and it doesn't seem that there's any negotiations happening. And again, President Biden not interested in stepping in, which really surprises me. I'm going to bring in Mark Tepper. Mark, Moody's Analytics assessment of what they're saying is as far as the economic hit. I mean, you were talking about 45,000 workers, 36 ports. You've got 85,000 100,000 union workers. Right? This could cost, and this is, I'm sorry, JP Morgan analysis, not Moody's. This could cost $5 billion per day. We could be losing $4.5 to $7.5 billion in GDP per week. And then Chris mentioning, obviously, these states have now been hit by a natural disaster, and they're going to be cut off from these supplies.
Yeah, and Cheryl, look, this is going to happen right as the holiday shopping season is going to be kicking into gear, which is totally frustrating. And what I've heard is that even a 2-week strike can actually disrupt supply chains into 2025 next year. So, look, I mean, I understand when people want more money. Everybody wants to make more money. Everybody wants to improve their standard of living. I don't know if 77% is reasonable, but the fact that they want to eliminate all automation, that's the thing that's really most disturbing to me from an economic standpoint, Cheryl, because, we need, when you look at AI and automation, that's what's going to drive productivity. That's what's going to drive efficiency and economic growth into the future. We need to embrace automation, not shun it. Otherwise, our adversaries are going to pass us up economically.
And also, Liz Peek, Benchmark Capital's Bill Gurley telling Fox Business that basically the federal government has got to step in. And he says outlawing the effective use of technology will unquestionably doom our nation. We will become globally uncompetitive.
Yeah, this is a tremendous blow to the productivity of our entire infrastructure, Cheryl, if President Biden doesn't step in. And viewers should know that he has the right to do that. The Taft-Hartley law allows him to call for an 80-day cooling off period, and that is what he's basically saying he won't do, even though, as your guest pointed out, 3 months of no negotiation. The industry is at 40% pay hikes, and the workers want 77%. Obviously, that is a huge gulf, and there has been very little effort or ability to make that gulf smaller. So I think this is a disaster. And by the way, the second surge of inflation typically comes because workers demand outsized pay hikes to make up for the years where they've been behind because of inflation. That's, I think, the really scary prospect going forward. Boeing and now the longshoremen and their other unions also circling who want big pay hikes because of Biden's inflation problem.
And the automation, Chris, real quick, final word, just a couple of seconds here. But the automation issue of this is what just baffles me, because you can't fight technology. And that's what they want to do. Banning all automation at the ports? That's incredible to me.
Well, we may as well be moving this freight with donkey carts. I mean, this is such an archaic view. And this is an administration that has emboldened union bosses to do exactly this. I was involved in the Taft-Hartley in 2002 when the West Coast ports shut down. I can tell you, you don't want to take any tools off the table. As president, it is your job to mediate these two parties when they can't reach an agreement. Well, they're already shilling for the union. These guys walked a picket line for the UAW, including the vice president and the acting secretary of labor. They are in the pocket of big labor. So if you're USMX representing these 36 ports, you have no incentive to come to the table and broker a deal with this administration because they've already shown their cards. So whatever it is, pay, automation, these are all issues that should have been at the table 3 months ago. They haven't talked, and that's the job of the president. They're asleep at the wheel.
Right. Chris Spear, thank you so much for joining us on this developing story, as, again, the countdown clock is now on for this strike. And it's just a devastating time, again, for this part of the nation. Thank you, Chris.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in one more time. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. I don't know if this is happening and Christmas is like, what, 3 months from now? What is going to happen to the produce? What is going to happen to all this grocery stores? What is going to happen? That's why I say, even if you're voting for Trump, please pray. If you're voting for Kamala, please pray. I'm not here to tell you who to vote for. Just make sure you pray for the United States. Pray for America. God bless America, man. Because this is just wild. All right. Senator Graham react to Trump calling Harris names. Let's listen. People are saying Trump should stick to the policies. He should stick to saying what he wants to do and less name calling. What do you guys think? I think At this point, everybody's just fed up. Everybody just wants low gas prices, low grocery prices, just low cost of living. The rent is all the way up. People are struggling, living paycheck to paycheck. People are just, people need a break. I need a break. I definitely need a break at this point.
Let's talk about the Trump campaign because I want to play something Trump said yesterday in a speech, ostensibly about Vice President Kamala Harris's visit to the border. Let's take a listen.
Kamala is mentally impaired. Joe Biden became mentally impaired. Kamala was born that way. If you think about it, only a mentally disabled person could have allowed this to happen to our country.
Okay, so first of all, there are actual people out there with mental impairments, and that's insulting to them. Second of all, Vice President Kamala Harris is not mentally impaired.
No, I just think she's crazy liberal. I don't question her.
But what do you think about that rhetoric?
I just think the better course to take is to prosecute the case that her policies are destroying the country. They're crazy liberal. 400,000 people have been let loose in our country. 16,000 people convicted of being a rapist. 13,000 convicted murderers, and 400,000 of people generally convicted of crimes released on her watch. It's not going to get better.
So I saw that statistic. We dove into it, our fact checker. That statistic is actually over decades. So some of those people you're talking about are people that came into the country during Trump. And second of all, some of them are in prison. A lot of them are in prison, not ICE prisons, but federal prisons for their crimes.
I can tell you this, the man who killed Laken Riley in Georgia was released by the Biden-Harris administration on parole because they had no capacity at the border to hold him. That's not a reason to parole people. I promise you, women have been raped and murdered. People have been hurt by illegal immigrants released into this country without detention. It is a nightmare. It is crazy. It's crazy to boycott a speech by the Prime Minister of Israel to a joint session of Congress thinking it won't embolden Iran. It's crazy to withdraw from Afghanistan hoping things will be different this time. Medicare for all, Green New Deal, crazy stuff.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying she's crazy. I'm saying your policies are batshit crazy.
Okay, well, they're not my policies, and there's a whole lot of things you said there. I'll just say she didn't boycott.
She didn't show up.
She didn't show up. But let's focus on Trump's rhetoric, because that's what I'm actually asking you about, because
the problems with the world are not Trump's rhetoric. They call him crazy. Pelosi wanted to invoke the 25th Amendment. Why don't you ever talk about that?
So Donald Trump also said this at an event on Friday.
If I lose, I'll tell you what's possible, because they cheat. That's the only way we're going to lose, because they cheat. They cheat like hell.
Okay, so in point of fact, it is anybody's. Tell me if you disagree with any of the statements I'm about to make. Okay. In point of fact, Harris could win or Trump could win.
True.
It's anybody's race.
True.
It's razor thin, and whoever wins, in all likelihood, it will not be because they cheated. It will. I mean, I haven't seen any evidence of any cheating.
Well, mail-in balloting was a problem with COVID. I hope we fix that. I certified the last election because I listened to the allegations of cheating. I thought it fell short in terms of changing the outcome. I'm more focused on today and tomorrow, and here's what I would tell President Trump. When people look at the state of play, they trust you on the economy, the border, inflation, and foreign policy by wide margins. Focus on those
Focus
issues.
on those and don't call Kamala Harris mentally disabled. That's your advice. One last thing. He has not agreed to do another presidential debate. Mm-hmm. Do you think that he should? For example, Kamala Harris has accepted CNN's invitation if they want to do another presidential debate. He liked the debate we did last time. He thought we were fair. He thought the rules were fair. Obviously, that was a very consequential debate. Should he do another debate?
I'm going to leave it up to him, but I'd like to see it myself because I think she's a mile wide and an inch deep. Look what's going on in the world. The world is literally on fire. They don't have a clue. They're paralyzed by fear when it comes to Iran. The world that Trump left us when he left office was mortgage rates below 3%, a secure border, peace agreements, no war anywhere. I would like to see her explain how she's going to change things when she's been in charge for 4 years and hasn't changed anything. I'd like to know from...
Thank you for tuning in one more time. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel if you are getting what you need on this channel, double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. If I am going to give any advice on the debate, I think Trump should say, you know what? I've done CNN with President Joe Biden, okay? And that was a consequential debate. Then we did ABC with Kamala. The next one should be with Fox. The next one should be with Fox, man. If it's not Fox, I don't think it should be accepting anything.
Her point of view, what did happen in the Mideast? Why do you think the world's on fire? Why do you think Russia invaded Ukraine? Have you not figured this out yet? That you're weak in the eyes of all of our enemies? And here's what I would say to Trump. If you do debate her, she is a mile wide and an inch deep, and you can prove that.
Joining us now from Arizona, where he is campaigning for the Harris Walz ticket, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. And Governor, obviously, Senator Graham, Lindsey Graham, has some strong views on this campaign, saying that Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, is a mile wide and an inch deep, and that she has a belief in policies that are, quote, I'm quoting here, batshit crazy. Wanted to give you an opportunity to defend the ticket.
Well, thanks, Jake. And, they have nothing on their side to talk about that's good for everyday Americans, for working families. That's why they're just name calling. That is what this is all about. You heard Donald Trump talk about mental impairment yesterday. I think whenever he says things like that, he's talking about himself, but trying to project it onto others. And all I can say is that, with a policy like a $6,000 child tax credit that'll help young families, $25,000 to help people who are first-time home buyers with a down payment, $50,000 tax break for people who are starting small businesses. Those are real policies that are good for Americans everywhere, and they're economic opportunity-oriented policies. Again, you hear nothing out of Donald Trump. Mostly it's about a big tax break for the wealthiest Americans when you hear the Republicans talk. I don't think that's what everyday folks are looking for when they go to the polls over the next 40 days.
So Vice President Harris is in Arizona yesterday to try to shore up an issue where she is vulnerable, at least according to polls, immigration and border security. In her speech, she doubled down on the issue of border security, said she would expand President Biden's crackdown on asylum seekers, which started earlier this year. That is quite a reversal from her position in 2019 when she was running for president, when she supported decriminalizing illegal border crossings entirely. Why do you think voters who care about this issue should believe her now when she says she's going to address this border crisis as a moderate or as a even center-right kind of position, especially when this crisis spiraled out of control on the Biden administration's watch?
Well, remember, there's been massive migration all throughout the world, people literally moving from one country to another, and that began to increase significantly over the last 4 years. So it's natural, of course, that you adapt your policies to meet the moment. And what Kamala Harris has put forward is that she would stand up for the bipartisan border security bill that Donald Trump torpedoed. Let's get some perspective here. 40 years we've tried to get some comprehensive immigration reform. It needs to be bipartisan because we haven't had a Senate that's had more than 60 members, which is the filibuster limit of either party. And the result is that we've had no bipartisan effort on immigration. We finally, under Joe Biden, got Senator Lankford and a total of 75 senators behind a border security bill. And you know who torpedoed that? Donald Trump. So we got to pay attention to the fact that Kamala Harris is actually trying to solve problems. Donald Trump has been all about Donald Trump and his election efforts.
So that effort, the Lankford bill, et cetera, that was in the last year. I mean, this has been a crisis that started in the first year of the Biden administration. And I know just from having covered it that the White House was rather dismissive of it and thought that this was just repeating right-wing talking points, et cetera. Vice President Kamala Harris was in charge of going to the Central American countries, addressing the root causes. But she's only been to the border before yesterday. She'd only been there once. It does seem as though the administration just in the last year has realized, oh, we need to really do something about this. But what about before? What about 2021, 2022, 2023?
Well, as you know, I'm from Chicago. I'm from Illinois. We saw an influx of migrants there, and you heard me talk about that over the last 2 years. One of the big challenges, so I've been, intimately in discussions with the White House about what to do. Look, it's a challenging issue to resolve without legislation. And that's been the problem for 40 years, Republicans, Democrats not working together. So in order to do it without legislation, you've got to go negotiate with all the countries that are south of us from which those migrants are coming to make sure that they're...
This is the question. Why is it now that she is visiting the border? This is what voters are saying. And this is what this guy on CNN is saying right now. Is like, yo, what about 2021, 2022, 2023? What's up? That's what people want to know. Now, do you realize it's a big issue? Man, double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel, man.
Are policies in those countries that will keep them from moving north and steadily toward the border and then piling up against our border. That is a problem because the president does not have the power to shut down the border. That could have been something in the border security bill that became law, but president doesn't have that. So you can only do it with a combination of policies and working with those countries. That is not an easy thing to do. You can't just overnight announce that you're going to do it. You've got to actually get those countries to agree. So it took a couple of years, frankly, for the administration working behind the scenes to get that done while they were also trying to get bipartisan legislation, and they came this close. And again, it was Donald Trump that torpedoed it.
So now he's saying the president cannot just say, okay, shut down the border. But according to the 45th, the OG, the legend, Donald J. Trump, who some people say he might be the 47th, says the president can just issue an executive order and say, close the border. So essentially he's saying that, no, that's a wrong information. Who are we going to believe now? Who do we believe? Okay. All right. So as we all know, the debate for the vice presidency is tomorrow, October 1st, between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. And CNN actually interviewed some of their former opponent. Let's see what they had to say about the candidates.
Is the one and only vice presidential debate of the cycle. It'll take place in New York City. CBS News hosting. Norah O'Donnell, Margaret Brennan will be moderating. Many are anticipating a high-stakes event following the Trump-Harris mashup earlier this month. It's the last debate currently on the schedule. So what can we expect? Joining me now, two men who have firsthand experience debating each of these candidates. Former Democratic Congressman from the great state of Ohio, Tim Ryan. He debated Senator J.D. Vance twice during that Senate battle in 2022.
This is not a guy who's ready to protect the rights of women. These are complicated circumstances.
The reason why we have skyrocketing gun violence in this country is because Tim Ryan and a lot of Democrats decided to declare war on America's police.
That shooter had all these great replacement theory writings that J.D. Vance agrees with.
Tim Ryan blames me and not himself for passing those laws in the first place. Doesn't make any sense to him.
Don't try to spin this because you don't want to talk about the fact that you're with the extremists.
And former Republican Minnesota State Senator Dr. Scott Jensen, he debated Governor Tim Walz 3 times in 2022.
I reject Governor Walz's comment that this is a false argument between family farms and ag. This is not a false argument.
We are competing globally. We are creating trade deals together, and the folks in this room made that happen. I'm proud of Minnesota's response. I'm proud of Minnesota's first responders who were out there, from firefighters to police to the National Guard.
Tim Walz denigrated the National Guard.
He is more concerned about this fake internet rumor than getting guns out of schools.
Nobody in Minnesota knows what Tim Walz means when he says fully fund education.
Congressman Ryan, you debated J.D. Vance twice in that cycle. What stands out to you?
I just think how slippery he can be. You know, there's a part of his thinking is I'm going to kind of deny what I said that's on tape in this moment when the lights are on and there's a lot of viewers, and then I'll clean it up after. So I think you're going to see a lot of misrepresentation. I think you'll see lies. And I think it's going to be very important for Tim Walz to be calling him out in real time.
He's pretty good on his feet, right? What props would you offer in terms of J.D. Vance as a debater?
Well, he's very thin-skinned, and so I think any kind of points that you want to make that are going to question his intellect or question his credibility or his honesty, I think that's when he kind of gets out of his comfort zone. He's thin-skinned. He'll want to defend himself. Then he'll move into a more angry J.D. Vance, which I think the American people have seen. And so I think, you know, getting into that space a little bit where you knock him on his heels, and we're talking strictly like debating tactics here, but getting him, I'd say, hit first and hit hard, and then hold him to account. And I think he'll be much better. You'll be able to handle it much better regardless of what the issue is.
Dr. Jensen, you debated Governor Walz 3 times, same year, 2022. What most stands out from those encounters?
Well, Tim Walz is an affable individual, and I think he does a nice job of trying to resonate with the everyday person. So I think that's the initial impression he'll make. But for me, I think it would be word salad. Tim is very good on his feet, and he can put one word after another. And when he's done, whether it's 30 seconds or 90 seconds, when he's done, your tendency is to say, yeah, that sounded pretty good. But then if you ask yourself, well, hold it, what did he actually say? Then you're sort of left a little empty. So I think he's very good at sort of an extemporaneous word salad. But I do think that J.D. Vance would do best to try to brand Tim Walz. Don't try to hit Tim Walz on all the various things. Don't allow 7 or 8 superficial wounds to take place. Try to get 2 deep cuts. You know, try to point out the fact that Tim Walz is a little slippery on labels. He's not quite accurate. When he says he retired as a sergeant major, pin him down. When he says he helped coach a team to winning a state championship in football, find out that actually he was one of 7 different assistant coaches. Try to pin him down and try to brand him so that when the debate is over, the audience has 1 or 2 things that they can really hang their hat on.
I'm smiling here because I think that Ryan and Jensen would be a hell of a debate, except you're both wearing the same clothing. I don't know how we would tell you apart. Congressman Ryan, you wrote this for Smerconish.com. This is Tim Ryan talking about J.D. Vance. Put it up on the screen. He maintains a tone that sometimes make it sound as though there are intellectual underpinnings to these MAGA talking points. It's skillful and likely a central reason Trump chose him. But when you listen closely, you'll hear how it's just a tactic to muddy the waters until the next question. Expand on that.
Yeah, I think that is why Trump picked him. I think, Trump will say something completely insane, 10 minutes before, and J.D. Vance will be on all the cable news shows wrapping around some kind of intellectual underpinnings to whatever crazy stuff he just said. And so I think tomorrow, when the debate happens, it's going to be an audience of 1 for J.D. Vance. His job is to make sense of the insanity. We just saw him try to do it around the Haitian issue in Springfield, Ohio, where he was saying all of a sudden, like, well, if I have to make up a story to get the attention of the American media, blah, blah, blah. Like, you'll hear a lot of that stuff, trying to put a bow, trying to put lipstick on the pig. And so, but that gives an opening, I think, to Tim Walz to go forward and say, this is BS. They're talking about themselves. Let's talk about the future of the country.
Dr. Jensen, you wrote these words for Smerconish.com. In closing, I feel compelled to share what should be expected from Tim Walz. Expect him to address his audience with hopeful and heartfelt words at a rapid-fire pace. Keenly crafted phrases will help him stay in safe harbors. The arc of his moral compass is more likely to bend toward an expedient moment in time than to be framed by a deeply rooted fabric of long-standing convictions. Expand on that.
I think Tim Walz is nimble. I think that he knows, and his team has coached him, when he can abandon someone who heretofore had been a big supporter. Tim Walz at one time very much gloried in both the contributions and the endorsement of the NRA. But when the NRA was no longer useful to him, he dumped them. I think a lot of people don't realize that in 2022, when I ran against him, the district that he had represented in Minnesota, the congressional district, he had won that 6 times in a row. Tim Walz lost that district to me. The people who knew Tim Walz best said, no, thank you. And I think what Tim Walz is trying to do now is he's trying to be supportive of Harris so that he can be a good cheerleader, and he knows how to do that. He's a former football coach on an assistant level, and I think that he's going to do for Harris whatever she needs. He's not going to upstage her, but you're going to see that his values are not driven from that fabric of deeply held convictions as much as it's going to be a zeitgeist moment. What are the activists telling us? What does Kamala Harris need from me? He's going to go that way, and he's going to try to deflect on whatever J.D. Vance comes at him. And J.D. Vance needs to stay cool, calm, and brand him with 2 or 3 specific items.
I'm always second-guessing myself after CNN programs, after radio programs, after public appearances, meaning delivering a speech. So final question for both. Tim Ryan, did you go home saying, woulda, coulda, shoulda, there was something I should have done, said to J.D. Vance when I debated him that lingers to this day? And then I'll ask the same question of Dr. Jensen about Tim Walz. Tim, you first.
Yeah, nothing that stands out in a big way. I probably would have been a little bit more forceful. I probably would have been a little bit more aggressive. I thought at that point we're running for the United States Senate. You want to be calm and keep your composure. But I think there probably could have been a few moments there where it could have been like, this is complete BS. I'm not going to let you get away with that, which I did a bunch. But, you always,
I was going to say,
when you lose the election.
Can I say, I watched your debates. You did do that.
Well, I'm half Irish and half Italian, Michael. So, the fighter, you never can fight and punch too hard. So I would say that would probably be it.
And Dr. Jensen, I watched all 3 of yours as well. I've been immersed in both of you guys for the last couple of days. What do you wish you had said or done relative to your debates with Walz, Governor Walz?
Michael, I made a mistake. I thought that Tim Walz was going to be true to his word when he said, yes, we'll have more debates. We'll have statewide televised debates. If I had known that it was going to be such a short conversation, I would have pushed much harder on the 3 basic issues that confronted us at that time: inflation and the economy, crime and safety, and education and what was happening to our kids. I thought we were going to get a broader conversation down the road. So from that perspective, we addressed the conversation and the questions that the moderators brought to us. Had I known that I wasn't going to get the chance to have a single televised statewide debate with Tim Walz, I would have pushed much harder on, tell us, Tim, why you're losing to me by double digits on each one of those 3 key issues: inflation, crime, and education. I don't think he ever answered that question to the Minnesotans.
Tuesday's going to be interesting. Thank you both, men. You're uniquely qualified to provide this analysis, and we're grateful.
Ladies and gentlemen, help tap your screen one more time. Subscribe to the channel. Are you ready for tomorrow? Are you ready for the vice presidential debate between Tim Walz and J.D. Vance? We are going to be streaming it right here. You know what time it is. All right. So, as we all know, the legend, the 45th, the OG, some people say he might be the 47th. Right now, he is in Valdosta, Georgia, and he's sending love to the Hurricane Helene victims. He's supplying waters and other stuff. in Valdosta, Georgia. So I'm going to play that right now. He is currently right now in Valdosta, Georgia. This is what a commander-in-chief does. This is what a leader does. He goes to this crime scene. He goes to this scene and do what he's supposed to do, which is support emotionally, physically, every way. Okay, let's get it. Legend. This is what a legend does. This is who you, bro.
And the Veterans Restitution Justice Act. Go, President Trump.
No, I brought a lot of many wagons of resources. Just about everything we can think of. Franklin Graham is here, and he's helping us to distribute everything. He brought a lot of things down. Trailers, many trailers of material. No, he hasn't. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for being here, and it's an honor. And
The legends say we brought many, many wagons of things that are essential, just about anything they need. He ain't even the president. Man, yeah, I'm voting for this man right now.
thank you to all of those great people at Samaritan's Purse who do
We've seen you at many different sites over the years, and you do a fantastic job in Franklin. The job that Franklin, who's right here, does, Franklin Graham. We appreciate it. We have, I think I can just go through the list. We have so many people from the state and from the area. We'll start off with Franklin Graham, President Samaritan's Purse. Thank you very much. Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Burt Jones. Thank you, Burt. Tyler Harper, we all know. Mike Collins, we all know. Congressman, and Austin Scott, great congressman, two incredible patriots. Kelly Loeffler, former U.S. Senator, highly respected person. Everybody loves her. Ross Goodman, State Senator. Sam Watson, State Senator. Thank you, Sam. John Corbett, State Senator. John Burchett, State Representative, as you know. John LaHood, State Representative. Ashley Polk, that's County Sheriff. Very good. Thank you, Ashley. Chase Daughtry, Cook County Judge, respected, so respected. Doug Hank, Cook County Sheriff. Ashley Ty, we know. Paige Dukes, we know. Richard Hardy, City Manager, Valdosta. Thank you. Where is Rich? Yes, thank you. Scott James, Bill Slaughter, Buddy Duke, Patrick and Kate Watson, the owners of the store. We just spoke, and I said I would have bought some furniture if you had some in there, but I always look for furniture, and they have beautiful stuff, but they're going to be rebuilt in a very, very short period, so I want to thank everybody. And we came down with truckloads of things, and we're going to have that done by Franklin's incredible organization. They've done such a good job. We've done this before, but we have a lot of truckloads of different items, from oil to water to all sorts of equipment that's going to help them. But we're here today to stand in complete solidarity with the people of Georgia and with all of those suffering in the terrible aftermath of Hurricane Helene. Hurricane Helene turned out to be a big one, like just about the biggest that anyone's seen. I spoke with all of the relief people, all of the people that do this for a living and do this at least to help, and they said they've never seen one this bad. Valdosta has been ravaged. The town is very, very badly hurting, and many thousands are without power. They're running low on food and fuel. We brought a lot of it down with us. It's going to be distributed now or soon throughout Georgia, as well as North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Virginia, Alabama, and Tennessee. That's a big one. And the devastation wrought by this storm is incredible. It's so extensive. Nobody thought this would be happening, especially now it's so late in the season for the hurricanes. Homes, hospitals, highways, and cars have been plunged underwater. Entire neighborhoods have been turned into lakes. Nobody's seen anything like it. And to every family that's been displaced here in Georgia and North Carolina, which has really been hit. We were going there also, and they don't have communication. They don't have anything right now. We're trying to. I just spoke to Elon. I'm getting him. We want to get Starlink hooked up because they have no communication whatsoever. And Elon will always come through. We know that. And so we're working on that, getting them hooked up. They asked me whether or not that would be possible. We're going to try and get the Starlink in there as soon as possible because they have no communication. And throughout the region, our hearts are with you, and we are going to be with you as long as you need. It's called an hour of need. You're in our prayers, and we pray to God. And throughout the long weeks that lay ahead, you're going to have a lot of work, but the end result is it's going to be good. We just wish so many people weren't so badly hurt, and in many cases, sadly, no longer with us. We love you. We love everyone. I mean, to be honest, we love everyone. And we'll be back, and we'll be back again soon. And we'll continue to help until you're bigger. I say bigger, better, stronger than ever before. But again, you can't ever discount the fact that people are lost. A lot of people have been lost in this terrible storm, this terrible hurricane. It's a storm that's also taken the lives of, I guess they have a count of 91, but that count changes on an hourly basis, and it goes only in one direction, unfortunately up, but at least 91 people already. And to the families and loved ones of those who have perished, we mourn alongside of you, and we grieve every single life so tragically lost. I'd like to now ask for a moment of silence and prayer, if you would, for those who have died. Thank you. Thank you very much. As you know, our country is in the final weeks of a hard-fought national election. But in a time like this, when a crisis hits, when our fellow citizens cry out in need, none of that matters. We're not talking about politics now. We have to all get together and get this solved. We need a lot of help. They have to have a lot of help down here. We look out for one another. We pull together. We pitch in. We persevere, and we pull it through. That is really the American spirit. That's what made America originally great. And that's why today I've come to Valdosta with large semi-trucks, many of them, filled with relief aid, and a tanker truck filled up with gasoline. We have a couple of the big tanker trucks filled up with gasoline, which they can't get now. And we'll be working to distribute it throughout the day. And I want to thank again Franklin Graham and everyone at Samaritan's Purse. You people are fantastic, by the way, and people appreciate you very much for the incredible partnering and work that they've done, not only here but all the time. They always seem to be the first ones at areas that need help. A short time ago, I received a briefing on the situation here in Valdosta from FEMA and the National Guard, as well as a number of state and local officials, quite a few of them. It's amazing the way it's just all been pulled together. Really amazing. I want to thank Mayor Scott James, Valdosta, where is Scott? Where is Scott? Hey, Scott. Thank you very much. Really great. Really great job. I want to thank Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and Agricultural Commissioner Tyler Harper, representatives, as I said before, Austin Scott and Mike Collins, and all of the others present. I also want to thank Governor Brian Kemp, who's working around the clock to get this problem solved. He's working hard around the clock. We also have a salute to the incredible first responders, law enforcement heroes, and they are heroes, doctors, nurses, firefighters, Coast Guard, National Guard, who have been serving with such extraordinary grace, and the work is incredible. Nobody thought they'd see something like this. You're the best. You are truly the best of America, and you're appreciated by America. Sometimes you don't feel that way, but you're very much appreciated by America. And I know each and every one of you is giving to this community of everything you have. You're doing things that you wouldn't normally even think about doing. The people on the ground are doing the best they can in every challenging circumstances. We do need some help from the federal government. They have to get together, ideally with the governor. The governor needs to, he's been trying to get them, and I'm sure they're going to come through. But he's been calling the president, hasn't been able to get him. But they'll come through, I'm sure. And Georgia and North Carolina need the help probably worst of all, but North Carolina has really been hit. They have really been hit. They say nobody's seen anything like that at all. Every part of these communities has been affected by this brutal storm, and countless Georgia cotton and pecan farmers. The farmers have been affected, Kelly, very, very badly, very, very badly. And I love those farmers, and we're going to take care of the farmers. There's no question about it. Their crops and their livelihoods have been so badly affected. Swift actions needed to get the farmers access to loans and disaster recovery aid to help them quickly get back on their feet so they can help our nation prosper. I always support our great farmers and agricultural communities, and just go out. I know that the help is going to be there, and help will soon be on its way. There's no question about that. With the path to full and complete recovery, we will work very hard. It won't be easy because this one is so bad, but we know in our hearts God is with us. God is strongly with us, and that the American people are stronger than any challenge that stands in our way. We have a lot of challenges in this country, more than we should have, frankly. But the American people are very strong and very smart. Working together, we'll overcome these hardships. We'll endure. We will rebuild Valdosta and every other town that has been so badly hit, and we'll emerge stronger, more united, and more prosperous than ever before. You're going to be stronger, better. You're going to learn a lot from it. And again, we pray to God for those that have been so badly injured, and for, in particular, for the people that are no longer with us. And God bless everybody. And Franklin, I want to thank you very much for your being here so quickly, very, very quickly. Always very early. And Franklin, maybe I could ask you to say a few words. Franklin Graham, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. This building behind us represents hundreds of thousands of people that have lost homes, businesses, friends, loved ones. And it's going to take an army of volunteers and people to respond. And of course, at Samaritan's Purse, we want to respond always in Jesus' name. And we want people to know that God loves them, that God cares for them. Sometimes when a storm like this comes, people think, well, maybe God is mad at us. Maybe this is his judgment. No, God loves us. How do I know that? Because the Bible tells us that God loves us and cares for us. And yes, there are storms in life, but God will take us through those storms if we put our faith and trust in his Son, Jesus Christ. Thank you, Mr. President, for coming and helping to put a spotlight on this city, this state, in this region that has lost so much. Thank you. May God bless you, Mr. President. I've been asked if I would lead in a prayer. Our Father and our God, we come today to say thank you for these men and women who are here as volunteers. Thank you for the President who has taken time to come and to see it for himself, to shake hands, to encourage, and to smile in the faces of people that have been hurt and devastated by this storm. Father, we ask for help. Father, we pray that as we come to this election, that your will be done. And so, Father, we pray for the President, strengthen him, protect him. Father, we thank you. And it's in Jesus' name we pray this prayer. Amen. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think he's having a conversation with these guys. I guess the leaders of Valdosta. I really commend him for coming down. You know, he didn't have to, but he did, and he also brought supplies for the people living in Valdosta. Once again, if you have been affected by Hurricane Helene, may God be with you and your family. Like I mentioned before, I had to move from where I live to an Airbnb 2 hours away from where I stay because we don't have electricity. So obviously we cannot refrigerate our food, no hot water or nothing like that. So I'm just thankful to God that I could actually, go out of town and afford a place and, make sure my family is safe because I got a 4-year-old daughter. You know, I gotta just do what I gotta do. But God is good. I'm thankful to God because I saw some people lose their house literally, like a huge tree landed on the roof, caved in the whole house, multiple houses. So I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful. So no matter what you're going through, just stay hopeful, stay grateful because God is good all the time, man. That's all I can tell y'all.
Stephanie. You gotta vote Trump, people.
People want to ask him some questions, of course. Oh, I think that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that is it. He has left or he is currently leaving. Man, it's not easy, man. A lot of lives has been lost. May God bless everybody who's going through all of this stuff right now, man. It's sad. Sad Hurricane Helene, man. Georgia Power just sent me a message and an email saying that this is the worst. Okay, let me just read it to y'all, man. I'm just read it to y'all. So according to Georgia Power, this is the email. This is the message that I got. Helene was the most destructive storm in our history. We understand how frustrating extended power outages are, and we are working to restore your service. You should have received your estimated restoration time. We hope to meet or beat it for the latest check. Blah blah blah. Man, I'm just thankful. But according to Georgia Power right now, they're saying like October 5 to October 10 is when we would be getting power. So man, it is a lot. It is a lot. It is a lot, especially like in this economy. You have to come get a place, Airbnb or hotels to eat out in this economy. But I'm not even complaining because the most important thing is that I am able to do it. So I am 100% grateful to God. That's all. All right, let's hear what CNN is saying about Trump's rallies and what he's saying about Kamala Harris. Of course, everybody's going to twist whatever he says, but let's listen. All right. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. Let's go. Yeah, my internet is slow in this Airbnb. I'm not even complaining, man. I'm grateful. I even have internet. I am 100% grateful.
Still looking at a too tight to call race and a within the margin of error race. And Donald Trump, despite all advice to the contrary, is leaning back on one of his preferred tactics, targeting Kamala Harris with personal attacks, even as so many other Republicans acknowledge that is not what they see as a winning message.
Joe Biden became mentally impaired, sad. But lying Kamala Harris, honestly, I believe she was born that way. There's something wrong with Kamala. And I just don't know what it is, but there is definitely something missing. And you know what? Everybody knows it.
CNN's Helene Train following this one for us. She joins us now. So, Helene, is there a strategy here? And what are you hearing about this?
This is not the strategy, Kate. And we've been very clear about this and covering this in our reporting, but in my copious amounts of conversations with Donald Trump's senior advisors, with outside allies, they have all pressured him repeatedly to move away from these personal attacks and to focus on the issues. But this is who Donald Trump is. And what's interesting about this is that these attacks came all really following her border visit on Friday. So Donald Trump had a series of rallies this weekend, some in Wisconsin. Yesterday we saw him in Erie, Pennsylvania. And all of his remarks really painted a very dark picture of America. Now, we know that is something that Donald Trump has done time and time again, but his comments really struck a different tone this weekend. And part of the reason I bring up Harris's border visit on Friday is because Donald Trump has been fixated on that, and it has struck, I believe, somewhat of a nerve with him. We know that that is turf that Donald Trump considers his own, and even as she was vowing to crack down on security at the border, to revisit asylum procedures, Donald Trump really turned his fire on her in a way that we haven't seen in a while, with calling her mentally impaired. We know that Donald Trump often refers to Biden as mentally impaired and questions his mental capabilities. But now he's doing that for Harris. And we did see many Republicans really push back on this on Sunday. You saw Lindsey Graham saying that he needs to focus on attacking the issues. Tom Emmer, who's been helping J.D. Vance prepare for the debate, all of them saying this is not the solution here. This is not the strategy. But Donald Trump, again, this is what he does. Kate?
Helene Train, thank you so much, Elena. Joining us right now is CNN political commentator S.E. Cupp. Let's focus in on what Helene Train was talking about in terms of, as she's been following the Trump campaign and gone to so many Trump rallies, the dark picture that he is painting continues to paint about the world today. And in part, also falling back on targeting Kamala Harris with personal attacks, even though Republican after Republican continues to say, don't. Let me play this.
Joe Biden became mentally impaired, sad. But lying Kamala Harris, honestly, I believe she was born that way. There's something wrong with Kamala. And I just don't know what it is, but there is definitely something missing. And you know what? Everybody knows it.
No, I just think she's crazy liberal. I don't question her.
But what do you think about that rhetoric?
I just think the better course to take is to prosecute the case that her policies are destroying the country. They're crazy liberal. Now, I'm not saying she's crazy. I'm saying your policies are bat crazy.
Lindsey Graham's take on the messaging and staying on or not on the message. It's not a strategy. It's just, it is Donald Trump. But the impact as it's fallen back on kind of the old tendencies as we're this late in the game. What do you think of this?
It's not a good idea, and Republicans who are worried about the health of the party down ballot know it's not a good idea. Swing state voters, undecided voters tell us they don't want this kind of language. They don't want her race questioned. They don't want to hear that she's crazy. They don't want to hear that she's dumb. They don't want the personal attacks. More than that, though, there's some other stuff he's been saying that, we're going to prosecute her. We're going to impeach her. A lot of swing state voters and undecided voters are also telling us they don't want the chaos that defined a lot of the Trump administration.
At this point, we don't care. We just want affordability. Everything is expensive. We don't care what, at this point, who cares what he says? Just get the job done. Actions speaks louder than words. Nobody cares about words. We care about the action. So, bro.
And they don't want all the oversight, the investigations, the nonsense clogging up Congress. So they're worried that if Republicans keep the House, all they're going to do is impeach and investigate and oversight. They don't want that either. So a lot of this stuff that he's saying is playing to the base, but it is not playing to the voters that he needs in this final stretch.
You're getting at something that's really, it's like two things existing at the same time, and it's like which one is going to win out, right? Yeah. Because one of the reasons, and one of the things we heard from voters ahead of the 2020 election when he lost was they were tired of the chaos. Yeah. They were tired of the nonsense. Mm-hmm. But now, ahead of the 24 election, we heard from a lot of voters, we really like the policies. Yes. I remember those good old days.
But you can't separate the two. And it's a shame because two of the top issues for voters really inure to the benefit of Donald Trump. That's immigration and the economy. If he could stick on those issues, I have no doubt he would win. But he can't. He's talking too much about issues that inure to the benefit of Harris, like abortion and women's reproductive rights. He's doing that in a way that does not appeal to these moderate voters, certainly doesn't appeal to the suburban women that he lost. So he's getting it wrong. We'll see if the issues are big enough to win out and block out the rhetoric. But I'm just telling you what we're hearing from swing state voters, the very voters.
Yeah,
will decide this.
And look, polling is showing she's closing the gap in terms of where the gap wasn't in terms of the economy. But immigration still, there is a lot of strength there to it. Yes. We'll see. VP debate. Yeah. Rarely carries a lot of weight.
Man, I cannot watch this no more, bro. So they agree on the fact that they agree on the fact that this man is better for the country. They agree on the fact that he had the better economy. They just literally said it. Well, they don't like the way he talks. Oh, we don't like the way he talks. He hurts our feelings. Man, nobody cares about y'all talking about all that.
I want to open it up to the floor, and Sarah, come straight to you. You've just been to the border.
Yeah, I was just in Douglas.
She knows she needs Arizona, yet she goes down there and makes a showing like this. I'm not sure it's enough to convince people.
Oh, no, it isn't. It wasn't enough to convince the people in Douglas. I was at Cochise County Fair. Everybody there was more than willing to run up and tell me how they felt about the vice president being there. They feel that she would purposefully opened up the border along with President Biden, that it wasn't just about erasing borders. And I think, Griff, you know this as well from being down there. It was creating a tsunami effect across the globe where people were just pouring into our country. They say 8 million. I say the number is somewhere over 10 million plus. And not only the criminals that we have documented on this new ICE report, but what about all the undocumented, the people that came in here, the known gotaways, that we have no idea if they've ever been convicted of a crime in their home country, in their homeland? We're never going to know. They're lost among our city, lost among the fabric of America, and our children are in danger. We're in danger. And also, what about the terrorists? So this is Kamala's policy. This is Kamala's policy. It is her border policy to leave the border wide open, and she's lying to everyone about this. And it was really a shame.
And this is actually what her deputy campaign manager, Griff, had to say about it. This is the spin. Let's take the soundbite.
Obviously, immigration is going to be a topic of discussion, and it's an important one, and it's something that's on the mind of American voters. I think the point that she is making is that look at what is happening. Somebody is actually putting in the work, and somebody is talking about it and continuing to stand in the way of progress. Vice President Harris supported a bipartisan bill that would have been the strongest and toughest on border and immigration in American history. Donald Trump opposed that bill and told Republicans to blow it up.
Okay, that bill, of course, would have codified illegal immigration. That's why Trump was against it. But your reaction
up to 5,000 a day. Look, what's interesting is I don't think he knows. He actually admitted that this is going to be.
Look, you have been the vice president for the past 3.5 years, and you still have a couple of months to go. If she goes out to do things right now, if she actually takes action right now, there could be something right there. But actions are not being taken.
A topic of discussion that's top of voters' minds, because I would argue to you, Jackie, that this chaos of the border that Sarah just so eloquently laid out, 8.5 million that have crossed under this administration, the 1.9 million known got away, so it is 10 million. Now you've got this ICE reporting that there's 15,000 rapists, 13,000 murderers, 425,000 convicted criminals that are likely loose on the streets of the U.S. I would argue he's admitting that this is the most important story of the last 4 years, the chaos at the border. And to put it into perspective, the DHS pushback was that it's been misinterpreted, that these numbers go back decades. Well, let's go back a decade. 10 years ago, in July 2015, Kate Steinle was murdered, being shot in the back in a pier in San Francisco. And it was a huge story for weeks because it was rare. Yeah. Now there's a Kate Steinle every single week. We're seeing these stories playing out, and that is the consequences of the border that has been an absolute on fire.
Thank you for tuning in one more time. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. If you're watching right now, who do you think would be better for the United States? The former president, the 45th, Donald J. Trump, or the current vice president of the United States, Kamala Harris? Put it in the chat.
From when it first started in Texas started hardening it. Then it went to Arizona. It's still in Arizona. And now in Jacumba, California, particularly in the San Diego sector, where Bill Maloogia and I have spent so much time. Sarah, you've been out there as well. And that's where we're seeing particularly people that are on the terror watch list crossing. And the majority of the people that are on the terror watch list come through that sector now. So there's the national security threat, Jackie. There's a public safety threat. And now you've got numbers coming out with the administration pushing back. Why? Because they don't want us to know.
Oh, of course not. And they're saying, let's go back a decade. Let's go back 6 years. Let's go back to 2018 and hear Kamala Harris chanting.
Up with education, down with deportation. Up with education, down with deportation. Up with education, down with deportation. Up with education, down with deportation.
Jason.
Yeah, if she wants to solve this problem right now today, she should be out there advocating to get rid of sanctuary cities and sanctuary states, because Chris Coons, he's got a lot of nerve going out there saying, well, a lot of these people are incarcerated right now. The problem with these sanctuary cities and states is they'll have somebody that's here illegally convicted of a crime and they won't cooperate with ICE. They can't do their job. That's on all the Democrats. That's not just on Kamala Harris. That's on all the Democrats. And don't tell me that you're trying to secure the border when you're by the hundreds of thousands flying people in from these terrorist countries like Cuba. You're flying them into the United States and Venezuela so that they don't even show up in any of the stats.
Or what about the former chief from San Diego testifying?
Yeah.
We have SIAs, we have special interest aliens that are crossing this border like we have never seen before. And he was specifically asked by this administration, by Harris and Biden, to keep it on the down low and to not put those numbers out. And that increase was significant.
And let's also, whenever they say, oh, well, Donald Trump was opposed to this border bill, the Democrats had the House, the Senate, and the presidency for the first 2 years of this administration. They didn't need a single Democrat. They didn't think that was an issue. For 3 years, they lied to the American people day after day after day, said the border was secure. Obviously, they were lying to us. And now, days before the election, voila, oh, it was Donald Trump's fault. Are you kidding me?
They're trying to spin the story a little bit so that they can claw back a couple of points. You know this better than anybody. In an election, they want to just not lose on the immigration issue by 18 points. You'd rather just lose it by like 11 points.
Because it looks better?
Claw a few points back. But I would say, if I could ask Vice President Harris a question, I would say, will you release all of the data that you have to show how many rapists, murderers, other criminals that are convicted that have been released under your watch and in previous administrations, the Trump one, the Obama one? Go back to Bush, as much data as you got, because at the end of the day, the American people deserve simply the truth, and they can make up their own mind rather than having them try and spin it, or in worst case, as Aaron Heike, the chief in San Diego sector, said, it was essentially a cover-up.
She could, you know what I would ask her, Griff? I would ask her, Vice President, you have the authority now to shut down that border. Why don't you just do it? You don't need to go to anyone else. You don't need to go to the Senate. You don't need to go to Congress. Just shut it down. But it's her policy, and that's why she doesn't want to shut it down.
Well, and a little bit later, we'll be talking about what happens when illegals go and they're not asked for identification and potentially want to try to vote. This is a huge issue, election integrity, as we're heading into November. Thoughts?
No,
Absolutely.
there are some places where you're not required to show an identification.
New York
It
is one of
so
them.
fundamentally wrong. Doesn't mean don't show up and vote, America. Go vote. You got to make sure and vote. But it is fundamentally bad to its core. Every single Democrat voted against the idea of the SAVE Act to actually require that somebody be a citizen of the United States to vote in the election. Every one of the Democrats, with I think 4 or 5 members in the House, they all voted against it.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard from Fox, CNN, Forbes, everybody concerning this situation, the border, both candidates. I do think that people are saying that they are much more better 4 years ago. Their pocket, their economy, the family were doing better 4 years ago than they are doing today. That's the bigger question. Most people are saying, look, I am doing better than I was 4 years ago. What about you in the chat? Are you doing better than you were doing 4 years ago? Put it in the chat right now. Because I was doing better 4 years ago. I mean, you could say it was whatever you want to say, okay? You could say, well, you made bad decisions with your money, blah, 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 whatever. But the fact is, I was doing better 4 years ago. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in one more time. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. It is what it is. This is another thing. If you're watching the live stream, make sure you are registered to vote. Because if you don't vote, then why are we doing this live streams? You got to make sure you vote, okay? Make sure you are registered to vote. Exercise your right, your duty as an American. Make sure you vote, okay? All right. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. We have come to the end of the live show. Thank you for tuning in. Instead of looking for perfection, seek for consistency. Instead of looking for perfection, seek for consistency. You guys are the best. No matter what you're going through, never ever give up on yourself, on God, on your dreams, because anything is possible, okay? Anything is possible. Thank you for being here one more time. Also, for anybody in Hurricane Helene's path, pray for you. Shelter, electricity, food, everything that you're missing, God is going to provide for you. That's all I can say. That's all I can say, man. God bless you. God bless you. It is your boy, Genesis. I am signing out. Thank you for tuning in. Your boy, Genesis, is about to leave. God bless you.